What suddenly ended your 5 or more year relationship? Look, unless someone cheats, it's usually not sudden at all. It's a slow, gradual, sometimes subtle change. Eventually one day you sit back and realize, what the frick, this just isn't working out, and hasn't been working out for quite some time, and then you end it. I was with my ex for 10 years. We met when we were in our late teens. We were very much in love and had a great relationship. The last year or so of our relationship, we both began to realize that we as individuals were stunted in our personal developments because we were holding onto a relationship that had lost its spark. People mature a lot in their 20s, and the person you were at 18 is not the person you are at 29. I was dumped after 9 years together, and I was absolutely stunned. I think what was going on was that he stopped loving me, but didn't have the courage to end it and just kept the facade going. One of the most painful moments was realizing I was begging him not to end this, on my knees, pleading with him because I still loved him. I'm still embarrassed about that. It's one of those memories that makes you cringe so badly. It left me somewhat broken. I've put my life back together in terms of a job and whatnot, but there's a part of me that feels like I've been thrown away. And if the person who loved me for that long threw me away so easily, I have a hard time believing that I'm worth someone's love and affection. I think, after a period of time, you just fall into a routine. You've been with each other for so long, it's not as simple as you're just going your separate ways. It's kind of an epiphany that you realize suddenly all the little things have added up. They've changed, you've changed, the dynamics of the relationship have changed. You just have to make the call in the best faith for both parties, and it's not an easy thing to do. You get used to the security, the structure and comfort a relationship brings, and the thoughts of being single again after so long is just terrifying. The security and structure was so big for me. Breaking up wasn't just a decision of, do I want to go on more dates with this guy or not? It was, do I want to end a day-to-day that I'm comfortable with, risk fracturing the friendships we've built as a couple, and spend the next 6 months trying to rid myself of the personal habit of saying we when I mean I? Yeah, it only looks sudden, but to them it's been a slow build-up. They'd try to ignore it and keep doing the actions, but it's still there. Then usually something happens that lets it all out. That seems to be the repeated mantra of the video here. It must be so devastating to the party who gets left out of the blue and isn't the one who's been feeling more of the build-up. I'd guess we're about to get a lot of stories from some pretty heartbroken people here. Oof, I had a kid with her. She was a loser and had no means to support herself, let alone a kid. So I tried to make us a family. I got her a car, paid her car insurance, paid for her phone, and tried everything to make her a functioning member of society. I paid for her school. She lied about going there and failed the first semester. I paid for daycare so she could get a job, and she lost the job and would just spend the day hanging out with friends. Finally, I just said screw it and asked her to be a good mum and take care of our daughter and keep the house nice. I'd come home and our daughter would have a loaded diaper, crying in the living room while her mum was locked in her room, going from show to show on Netflix. I tried everything to make it work. She was crazy and violent to boot. I tried to leave to stay with a friend for the night to let things cool down, and when I finally did get away, I'd get a call from the cops asking me to come back to the apartment because she had called them saying that I hit her. Thankfully, the cops saw through the lies pretty easily, so that never got as bad as it could have. Finally, I had a realization and I snuck my daughter and I out of the house at 2 a.m. to avoid any confrontations and started a new life. She's left the state now, and my daughter and me are just fine. We've even added a stepmom and fiancé to boot. I guess it just took 2 years to realize that I could do it myself and people just can't be changed. The sad thing is, she was probably glad you left with your kid too. I knew a girl from college who had a kid. Same kind of person, had a baby freshman year. Then a year later, the father took full custody and she was all, I don't give an F, ain't my problem no more. Then she dropped out with a substance addict. I'm sorry to hear about that though, but I'm glad you're doing better. You sound like a good dad. It wasn't okay for a long time, but I wasn't able to let it go. I still loved him with all my heart and kept telling myself it would get better. I convinced myself that we can overcome and that in the end it will be worth it. It was just so frickin' hard to let go. When we finally broke things off after more than 5 years, it was a relief. I was liberated from the emotional prison I'd put myself into, and I was free to enjoy my life again. It took a few months, almost a year actually, to be over him, but today I can gladly say that life has never been better. Recently broke up with my girlfriend of 9 years. She's a really great person and I'll always love her, but the reason we broke up is because her family took precedence over our relationship. She'd check with her mother with decisions in our relationship that didn't involve anyone but the two of us. They also never liked me and apparently told her she could do better than me for years behind my back. I never felt like a part of her family, while my family was devastated that we broke up. Ew, F that family. My significant other's family treats me like crap because I saved him from being constantly walked all over by them. He was their Cinderella. He felt obligated to pick up after his entire family. His 50-year-old mother acts like a child. She'll break glass and leave it all over the floor, not feed her animals, and never pays her bills. I really understand a great deal of the in-law tension. Buttholes will continue to be buttholes. We had been together for over 6 years, living together for 3 of them. Everything was going great, or so I thought. In fact, when he came to me one afternoon and said very seriously, "Can I talk to you about something?" I jokingly said, "What, are you going to break up with me?" Turns out he'd been thinking very seriously about the next step in our relationship. Our friends and family had started pressuring him to propose to me. None of the pressure was coming from me at all. I've always been of the mindset that if we're going to be together forever, then it didn't really matter where the wedding fell on the timeline. Not to mention we couldn't afford the wedding we wanted. Every time he started to think about it, he'd panic and start doubting whether or not he loved me enough to marry me. He spent weeks debating it before deciding that if he was doubting it at all, then it wasn't meant to be. It's one of those things that you should know without a doubt, in his mind. So he broke up with me and moved from our apartment in Manhattan to a neighborhood near his family in Arizona. The moment he got on the plane to Arizona, he realized what a huge mistake he'd made. If he waited until he found a girl that he'd never had a sliver of doubt about, he'd die a very lonely old man. Fortunately for him, I forgave him, and 3 months later, I moved to Arizona to be with him, and we're getting married next year, pending the funds to do so. Just thought I'd add a story with a happy ending here. We were together for almost 10 years, starting in college. It was definitely a slow fade. He was finishing his education and thinking about the next stage of his life. Ultimately, we didn't want the same things, despite talking about the future frequently over the years. We got to a point where I wanted to get married and have kids, and he couldn't tell me enthusiastically that he wanted the same things. It was a long process of realizing that we were better friends and roommates than anything more. Eventually, I broke it off on really good terms. I'm grateful that over a year later, we're still friends. Honestly, for me, it just never really worked at all. The whole relationship was broken almost from the start. It just kept going on because I just kept putting up with it, and being with someone was more important to her than being with the right one. Well, she effed my best friend, and about a year after all of that went down, they got engaged. And he had the cojones to ask me to be a groomsman. Yeah, I just couldn't get along with my wife's boyfriend. I could see that being the death knell in some relationships, although some polyamorous folks seem to do all right with it. I guess it depends whether it's an ongoing, agreed-upon thing, or a bit more of a late-notice FYI. 1 week ago, down to the hour, my boyfriend of over 6 years left me. We had the most incredible relationship. Our friends called us the power couple because we both had awesome, independent lives but loved one another immensely. When he broke up with me, he said that he loves me immensely, but that he's afraid about the future. We're high school sweethearts, and he feels that he hasn't experienced enough of the world to know what he wants or to be emotionally intelligent enough to find it. He said that, at this point in our relationship, we were heading towards marriage, and he just didn't know if that was what he wanted. For me, this came out of nowhere. He'd been telling me since year 2 that he was starting to save for an engagement ring, and I continually told him that I wanted to marry him one day, but not until after our degrees were finished. We had an amazing relationship, and I loved him immensely. I was absolutely blindsided. I know that he's the man for me, but I'm trying to move forward with my life out of respect for his wishes. Everyone should have the opportunity to know themselves before they commit, and I don't want to be with a man who doesn't feel the same conviction towards me as I do towards him, even though I'm in incredible pain right now. I feel like I'm dying. I'll take this moment to give some unsolicited advice. If he does come back, don't act grateful or make it easy. It puts your relationship on the wrong footing, even though you're absolutely certain. One of my friends was in a very similar situation, and it just really throws off the dynamic of a relationship if one partner thinks they can just wander off for a while and then be accepted back with open arms. Most of my long-term relationships lasted largely because one side was putting in more work than the other, to the point that it remained satisfying enough for the less emotionally invested party. Eventually, someone gets tired and realizes just how little the other side is contributing, and the death of that relationship begins. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mine was fairly sudden. In about a week's time, I realized that this relationship was not going anywhere. It was more of a recovery for her than anything. I loved her a whole hell of a lot more than I did love even myself. She was my everything, and I did everything to try to get her better. About 3 years of living with her, and 2 years of dating prior, I was certain I was going to marry this girl. When the time was right, of course. Some things led to others, and arguing started. It was always there, but never this much. About 4 months, non-stop arguing about, well, everything. I don't know what happened. I don't know what led to it all, I just know that it happened. I didn't want to think anything of it. I've seen things like this happen a lot, and couples still recover. I thought it would be over soon. Soon. Every frickin' day, I thought, soon. It'll be over soon. Everything will get better, and then I started getting depressed. I started hating myself for not doing better. Everything just started to go wrong. We hadn't slept together for over 3 weeks. We hadn't had a normal conversation in over 2 months. I still loved her. I couldn't let her go. I just couldn't. She was my everything. I didn't know what I'd do without her. But I didn't know what I'd do with her either. Her recovery was still being worked on. She hadn't really recovered from much. Still the constant drinking and smoking, and I realized it was just way too late. This was doing me more harm than good. This girl I loved was slowly killing me. With every drink she took, with every bud she smoked, with every argument we had, she was killing me. I promised myself, to God, to every frickin' body I knew, that I'd get this girl to recover, even if it meant I'd die for it. Turns out, I couldn't. I just couldn't take it anymore. A week's time, that all happened. All that recreation and realization. I told her that I couldn't take it anymore. It broke my heart as much as it did hers, I think. It made me feel numb for months straight. I just stopped talking to her. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing her like that again. I knew she'd still be drinking, smoking, and whatever else was there. I still loved her too much to see it happening before my eyes. So I just stopped talking to her. Stopped seeing her, stopped everything with her. My parents always taught me to never be selfish, to always help others and see my way through everything without causing harm to others. And a tip to everyone listening, there is a time to be selfish, there is a time to be caring too, but make sure one never takes over the other. Age and life experience, or lack thereof, are major factors. I met my ex-wife when we were in high school. We were together almost 10 years. In that time, we grew up. It reached a point where neither of us could grow any more as people. The relationship became a barrier to us developing in a healthy direction. Breaking up was critical for us. That didn't mean we loved each other any less, we just needed room to grow. When you start a relationship and you're, say, 22, there's a big difference between who you are as a person at 22 and who you are as a person at 27. Life goals change, opinions and viewpoints change, and sometimes you just grow apart. It's not that you dislike the person, you just no longer share the same values. It happens all the time. You know, I wish I knew why mine ended. He left me without explanation, and to this day I have no idea why. It's never worked. I was just too much of a pushover to tell her how miserable she was making me. Yeah, that can be the case in a lot of relationships. I feel like especially us guys are quite prone to just dully sticking our heads down and checking out mentally until people break up with us. I've been there. I really hope I'll be smart and brave enough to never let things get to that stage again. My ex and I were together for more than 6 years. He was a great guy, and breaking up with him was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. Like all the other comments here, I'd felt like we'd grown apart. I tried telling him on several occasions I wanted our relationship to change, and this was why. For the 6 years we were together, we never took a vacation together. He didn't even have a passport. I even went as far as to fill out the form for him, but he always pushed it off to the side. I wanted to travel. I'd spent 3 months with my mum traveling Southeast Asia, and it was the best thing I've ever done, and I wanted to share that with him. But I felt like he was never motivated or expressed interest. He'd tell me he was focusing on our future, and that meant he'd need to focus on his courses during the school year and working full-time in the summer. We also had different friends. This was something I couldn't wrap my head around. His core group of friends had been friends in high school. He grew closer to them since they went to the same university, and they all decked to join a fraternity. I was rarely invited to any parties. I often offered to be their designated driver. What bothered me was that he never wanted to take a trip or vacation with me, but had an annual end-of-spring semester camping trip that I was never invited to. I still had a core group of high school friends I stayed close with. I invited him out every single time I had dinner or get-together. When he did come out, he was never engaged with my friends. He'd sit back and be occupied with his phone. He'd smile and nod at jokes, but never jumped into a conversation. I knew his friends didn't like someone from my group, but hoped he'd get along with the others. I'd also started a new job and had work friends. I invited him out with my work friends. These friends were all our age, by the way, and he just never came out. I still remember my coworker telling me she'd only ever seen him once when he picked me up. I had school friends, I had a design program that I entered, and they always joked about my imaginary boyfriend, one I'd talk about, but they had yet to meet. During the last couple of years, I had really tried to make things work between us. I tried to approach the topic in different ways, telling him I wanted to travel and filling out the passport for him. I continued to invite him out with my friends, and he just declined. I asked about hanging out with his friends, and it didn't work out. I remember our last Christmas together, he said his friend, that I used to be friends with, had invited him to their family party. They lived 3 blocks from me, and aside from him, had insisted that it was family only. That night was one of the biggest snowstorms. I remembered staying in and heading to bed early. I got a call from a friend in my core group asking me where I was. I told him I was in bed. He told me to get dressed, he's picking me up and driving me to the party. I declined, but he insisted. When I showed up, I remembered the shocked look in my ex's face, in a crowd of his friends, his frat brothers and some of my friends. I said hi and told him I'll be hanging out with my friend because he invited me. I had a great time, played drinking games with his frat bros. Some of my ex's friends even hugged me, saying that they don't see me enough. This bugged me because clearly it wasn't because his friends didn't like me, and that's why he wouldn't invite me to hang out with them. I never knew why. I genuinely had a great time that night. One of his frat bros even hit on me and became extremely apologetic when someone tipped him off that I was dating one of the senior frat bros. That night, my friend that invited me offered to drive me home because of the snow. He offered to drive my ex and his twin, but they both declined and walked instead. I never brought up that night to my ex. I never got mad at him. I just felt disappointed that he didn't invite me, but also felt confident that I was a fun person. In the very end, maybe the last 5 or 6 months of our relationship, I gave up. I stopped inviting my ex, I stopped showing interest in his parties, I began exploring things that I showed my interest in on my own. I went out every Tuesday for cheap movie nights with my friends. My ex and I saw maybe 3 movies together at the start of our relationship. I started going to concerts, attending art shows with new friends. I started going out to dinners and drinks alone with school friends. I took a long weekend trip with some coworkers. I admit I emotionally distanced myself. He'd realized that I was slipping away, but by then it was too late. I became busier and had less time for him. We'd see each other only every couple of weeks. It was only if he stayed over at my house. One day, we both felt it, when he hugged me and I was so stiff and physically repulsed. He asked me what was wrong. I said it was something I needed time to think about on my own time. He straight up asked if I still loved him, and without thinking, I just instantly replied, no, and that was it. He said he was walking out of my bedroom door, and if he did that, he wouldn't come back. I didn't stop him. In short, my ex kept me to himself, away from his family and friends, and didn't bother to get along with my family and friends, which made it too easy for us to grow apart. No regrets. I should say the only thing about your decision you should regret was, ironically, your spelling of regret. But I largely agree with you. There's a lot of nice people who dig themselves into a comfortable little rut and don't want to do anything outside of it to make you happy. They can be fine people in their own way, I guess, but I sure as heck wouldn't want to be with one of them. My ex-fiancée cheated, but the end was not sudden. I'd been supporting her and I for about the 3 years prior to us breaking up. She had been working on her undergrad with aspirations for medical school, so I had no problems with supporting her because in my mind it was always for us. We traveled a lot in the last year we were together for interviews for different C-Med schools for her. Eventually, about 6 months prior to the breakup, she got an acceptance letter. That letter was the notable deterioration of our relationship. She started talking down to my family. She stopped saying when we and started saying when I. I confronted her about this and she shrugged it off, saying there was nothing to worry about. She started getting more and more blatant with her disrespect of my family and eventually with talking down to me as well. We had moved out of our house because our lease was up, but we were supposed to move more than 400 miles away to a new city for med school within a month, so we had to move in with her father temporarily while we waited. I quit my job of 5 years. We're talking the kind with full benefits, 401ks and stuff. I did this the week before we were supposed to move. Well, that last week she stayed out all night randomly, 2 nights in a row, and wouldn't answer phone calls from me or her father. The first night she said she fell asleep at a friend's, and the second, we both stayed up until 6:30 a.m. waiting for her, and she finally strolled in, still smelling of booze. She tried to say that she had fallen asleep at a friend's again. I really wanted to believe that. My last day at work, I got a phone call from her mother saying that my ex had just admitted she was cheating on me, and her mum had called me as soon as she found out. I confronted my ex, took back my ring, and have never seen her again. This was 2 years ago, and we'd been together for 5 years. Because I stopped allowing him to push me around and realized just how poorly he treated me, not just at home, but in front of other people and in public. He didn't think he'd done anything wrong, and you can't fix or reason with the person who thinks that putting a weapon to their girlfriend's head is an acceptable reaction to not having a mortgage payment, or not being able to get into your email. Snipers. What do movies and pop culture misrepresent about your job? Being a sniper essentially boils down to your being incredibly uncomfortable at all times. You should learn to love being cold, wet, and generally having an overall terrible quality of life while you're operating. Firstly, physically getting to the objective is absolutely brutal and is probably the worst part of the job. Often you'll be laden down with about 200 pounds of gear and specialized equipment, including water, food, ammo, weapons, and radios or batteries, which you'll have to carry silently through the night for several miles in the worst terrain you can find before you even get to the office to work. Once you spend however many hours or days suffering while getting there, you'll have to set up a hide site for your team. There are a ton of variations on splitting up hide sites or different hide styles that you may feel compelled to use depending on the situation. You'll probably want to get your hide built and loaded before the sun comes up, or you're going to have a bad time. Most media portrays snipers as working alone or in pairs at most, but real-world sniper teams are usually 6 to 8 guys switching out team roles for the duration of the mission. Certain aspects of team composition and equipment will vary from branch to branch and between units, but most teams should include a team leader, assistant team leader, someone with a heavy weapon, a radio operator, a corpsman/medic, and a slackman or flex spot. Unless your team leader is terrible and doesn't train his guys, everyone in the team should confidently be able to take over anyone else's job at any point and continue operating. Everyone should also know how to use every weapon in the team, regardless of their own assigned billet. Other shooters and spotters can be added if you need more bodies, but the general goal is to maintain as small a footprint as possible out in the landscape. Often we'd be at the team leader's discretion with how he wished to distribute his team and their loadouts. Obviously, the situation will dictate this to a degree as well, and you may swap out the weapons and equipment depending on what you expect to encounter or engage. Most media also tends to leave out how meticulous snipers are when they clean up or leave their hide sites. An enormous amount of effort is put into not leaving behind target indicators that could possibly get your teammates killed or injured, or potentially poison the well for operating in that area in the future. Nobody should ever know that a decent sniper team was operating in the area if they do everything right. There you go, there's apparently less lone wolf stuff than a lot of us are led to believe, and these squads of highly trained professional unalivers rely on super competent military equivalents of a middle manager to see them through it all. Former Marine grunt here, STA or Surveillance and Target Acquisition Platoon is not nearly as glorious as people think it is. Actually, shooting targets is a fairly small part of their overall skill set. Their primary mission is recon and observation. The reality of sniping is less waiting around to shoot a high-value target. The reality is usually snooping your way into an observation post under cover of darkness, building a hide that you must remain almost completely still in 99% of the time, going number 1 and number 2 in plastic bags, and making sure you leave no trash behind to give the enemy any idea you were ever there. Then, after a few days of this crap existence, you quietly and sneakily break down your hide to snoop your way back out. Now, that being said, I know a few guys when I was in, and there are some well-known stories about them stacking some serious bodies, but those guys are generally the exception, not the rule. The boredom. It's a little like golf, lots of practice and repetition. On the other hand, you get really good at estimating wind speed, distance, and elevation. Having a good spotter kills time. Lots of Archer and Super Troopers references, lots of movie quotes. I bet the Archer quote is always, "Big whoop, I'm spooning a Barrett 50 caliber. I could kill a building." According to Eric Haney, the sniper in Delta Force, one of 2 things can psychologically happen to a sniper. 1, you become emotionally attached to your target after watching them for hours and can't pull the trigger when the time comes. 2, the power of watching a person dissolve in a cloud of red mist makes you feel powerful, and you want to go on a spree. Usually in fiction, the sniper is either alone or is with a spotter that's less experienced. In reality, the spotter is usually the more experienced in the team. The spotter chooses the target and does calculations to account for distance, atmospheric conditions, among other things. I'm not a sniper per se, but I am a long-range shooter. When you're running big calibers and you send a round, the recoil is going to make you lose the view in the scope. Rarely are you going to watch the round impact through the scope. 17 HMR most can, and with a 22 long rifle and WMR I can as well. Depending on the rifle, 223 sometimes you can keep an eye on it, but for the most part you lose visual. It can also depend on the scope and the magnification. Confirming the target is down is one of the duties of the spotter. While the spotter is doing calculations, the sniper is watching the target. The spotter pretty much does all of the calculations for the shot, and the sniper is just there to pull the trigger. In most cases, the spotter is more experienced than the guy on the rifle. Howard Wasden in his book talking about being a sniper in Somalia. He was protecting some helicopters coming in and grabbing suspects, and he saw someone come around a building with an RPG, and he ended up putting a round in the guy's face. He made a point of saying that in movies the bullets always knock him over, but in real life the bullets suck them in. Also, back at base, when everyone was congratulating him on protecting them and getting a headshot, he made sure not to tell them that he wasn't aiming for his head. It takes a great deal more patience. A couple of minutes of spotting target in film is almost always a couple of hours in real life. You have to nearly meditate, but be ready to act at a moment's notice. Excitement is the enemy. Icy calm rules the day. You can do everything right and still miss, especially at a great distance or when the wind is active. Doubly so if both are factors. Spotters are a part of it, whereas in the film, the lone wolf is frequently the communicated image. Even if you're content to do the job, erasing life can wear on you, because rarely, if ever, in modern day are you fighting a war that involves your nation's very survival, as was the case in past wars. Now you're just punching tickets in most cases. Unless you lack humanity, it's not enjoyable. Oh, and you don't pull triggers, you squeeze them. It's boring, punctuated by a brief time passage, so intense it feels like you've aged years. For some reason they made one of the bad guys from Lethal Weapon a sniper, but they were also an albino. Albinos have poor eyesight. I guess it's more of a misrepresentation of albinos. In real life, there's no respawn. Probably no lag either. This topic needed a serious notes-only addendum so that people like me don't post about how good we are at sniping auctions on eBay. I don't think they ever show the actors wearing diapers because they can't get up to take a leak when sneaking along in a ghillie suit. I was on a roof in Iraq. There was a crap ton of people walking in the street below me and I couldn't really move. I had to whiz like a motherfricker and just happened to find this little tube beside me, so I whizzed in it in an attempt to keep the wee off me. It started pouring back towards me and I had to push dirt to create a little makeshift dam to stop it. Another time I was trying to go in a bottle and I got stuck in the bottle with a suction effect. That one hurt. I'm not a crazed shooter, Dad, I'm an assassin. Well, the difference being one's a job and the other's a mental sickness. The narrator would like to thank the sniper from Team Fortress 2 for taking time out of his busy schedule of being the worst class in the game and lending his expertise. First round hits are actually pretty rare. Your follow-up shot is critical. With modern optics, you rarely put crosshairs directly on the target. You use holds. My buddy, when we were in Iraq, finally got the sniper that was harassing our guard towers. He had an M14, spotted him, fired the shot and missed. The motherfricker stood up directly so that my buddy didn't have to adjust his sight pictures, as the sniper stood up in the exact spot that he had just missed. Bang. Snipers almost never see any action. They mostly just hurry around. Even in active war zones, the movies make it look like non-stop action, but they mostly just sit and wait and smoke and eat chow and wait more. Typical military, really. Hurry up and wait. My grandma's brother was special forces back home and he said his favorite was sniper training. He mentioned that being sniper takes a certain kind of individual, and I know he's seen combat, but he's never told me much. My buddy was spec ops in the army, said he passed on sniper school because it seemed too personal. His explanation was that in a firefight you're spraying and praying at someone who's spraying and praying back at you. A sniper though, you're looking at your target, you see their face, and you kill them. That's gotta weigh on you after a while. The movies don't show the tension, the thrill, or the light intakes of breath while watching your target and waiting to the exact right moment to press the trigger and buy that item on eBay with 1 second remaining. Long-range shooter and varmint hunter from way back in the day. The depiction of snipers yanking the trigger, their body movement, and the gun twisting and jumping is wholly not the kind of real movements for a perfected shot. The gun must move from its recoil, perhaps back and up a little bit, but any other movements are just baloney, and would cause a miss for a shot fired at any longer distance target. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Retired SWAT sniper here, just a few off the top of my head. The spot with the best view is always on top of or very near an ant bed. If the ants have the day off, expect mosquitoes and biting flies. You're there for hours or days, hot or cold. Sometimes you have to get up and move quickly after laying up for a very long time, and you're sore as heck and legs are probably asleep. You might fall back down and look like an idiot. Movies and games ignore the bathroom issues. Your ghillie suit stinks and is full of burrs. Roaming dogs can give you a spot away. Inevitably, your hide requires crawling a long way on your belly. Not hands and knees, but flat out pulling with fingers and toes. Dirt. Dirt is everywhere. It's hard to hide and keep your bullet free of foliage and obstruction all at the same time. You carry a lot of crap and you have to collect all of it when you move. Don't run out of anything like water or radio batteries because resupply will give you away. In some deserts, you'll encounter walking cacti. Those things suck. If you have allergies, you'll be crawling 400 yards through whatever's pollinating at the time. Oh, and what everyone else said about wind, temperature, humidity, vertical angles, and zero. It's really difficult to quickscope. Also, many people think that I have an aimbot, but I'm clearly just a god. When you shoot someone with a sniper, they fall forward, not backward most of the time. If they're standing still, they collapse like someone just teleported their backbone out of them. Really hard to envision unless you've seen it, but imagine going completely paralyzed instantly. You drop like a sack of bricks. If you're running, it looks like they just tripped and ate crap when they got hit. I'm not a sniper, by the way, but I work a coaxial weapon that has some decent range. I shot a long rifle once. The biggest lesson for me was that unlike in Hollywood, you shouldn't put your eye so close to the scope. Rather, it's always a few inches away. I'm so glad I wore glasses so that I had some kind of eye protection, otherwise I'd probably be blind in one eye. If someone says, "Sniper, no sniping," you have to cease sniping immediately. The following is from an American perspective on the war on terror. Everyone seems to focus on the modern sniper as this precision shot guy, and there is that aspect to them. But to me, working with them, it seemed like much more of their time and energy was spent on the reconnaissance role, especially with the proliferation of IEDs in this war. Basically, having a sniper team or squad set up an observation point on a ridge somewhere, watching over a particular stretch of road where IEDs have been common, or you have intel that one might be laid. Sniper team scouts that stretch of road from their operating position, and maybe they see the team go to place the IED. Then they call artillery in on that position, and you can apply this to other sections. Scouting an area where insurgents frequently set up ambushes, see if you can catch them while setting up. Providing overwatch for an infantry platoon as it patrols an opposing ridgeline or village. I've never heard of any other soldier say this, but one of our recon platoon's NCOs once mentioned a saying that a sniper's most powerful weapon is his radio. I don't know if that's actually a common saying within the scout sniper community or not, but in my observational experience, it really rung true. Fun fact, every one of those memory games and what's the difference between these two pictures is a gauge of how good a sniper you'll make. The best way to snipe is not to spend countless hours sitting still and silently waiting for the perfect shot. The best way to snipe is to jump off buildings doing a 360 motion while quickscoping offensively. You don't say. You know, the further through these answers we get, I suspect we're getting more and more silly ones. Apart from this one, 360 no-scopes are clearly based on real life. There's a lot of math. Can see why nobody puts that stuff into movies, though. Sort of relevant, I heard from one of my recruit trainers that if you hear a shot from long range, you shouldn't panic. The sniper's already missed. Because the bullet travels faster than sound, the first thing you hear is the impact of the round striking something, then the shot. My sniper section leader loved to say, "Snipers wear diapers." While I wasn't exactly busting out the Huggies, thank frick that I never needed to, just remember that everyone goes number 2. Enjoy those 2 weeks, small kill team, frickers. Also, those stupid stories about snipers seeing tears in the eyes of victims from 1,000 yards away right before they start landing headshots against whoever they're fighting is bullcrap. Your scope isn't that good. My grandfather was a sniper in Korea. He watched a guy for a week and learned his habits. He knew that guy was going to go down to the river to pray and planned to do it there. But on the day he began thinking of all the things he was going to take away from him and the people he'd be leaving behind, on that day he didn't pull the trigger. But then the next day he came down to the river to pray and didn't leave the riverbed alive. According to a family friend who's been a SEAL sniper since 2003, when you hit someone with a large caliber like a .50 or .338, you look for the spray of mist that comes up. Everyone is right about the math in the earlier comments. Ammunition is being selected and sometimes even hand-loaded. You take the spin of the earth into account, and then there's the waiting and waiting and waiting. It takes way more effort to cop all the hypebeast brands. You need to snipe the drops or they'll sell out in seconds. Not to mention the crazy bots people use. The world is against you. One thing I enjoyed about long weapon work is training as a spotter to see trace or the ripples in the air from the bullet path. It's pretty important for coaching your shooter and identifying where the bullet went. I don't recall seeing any accurate depiction of that in film, other than in The Matrix, and then only for dramatic effect. I'm by no means an expert on sniping. I trained in it for a time and I enjoyed it. Had a lot of respect for the repetition and discipline it took to get good. There's a lot of pride when you hit a small target at long range using a precise weapon. Film tends to underestimate the time investment and discipline required to get good at a skill like that. I worked with a guy who told me he had to wee in his own pants, or I think he said bronze his boots, on the job. So I'm not a sniper, but I am familiar with a lot of the military stuff. Here's my short list of things that are bullcrap. First, headshots. Snipers don't aim for the head unless they have to. Instead, they aim for the heart and lungs or center mass because it's a larger strike zone and it's still just as lethal, even if your shot is off by an inch or two. Also, laser sights. Absolutely no sniper in their right mind is going to use something that's going to give their position away or alert their target. This one's a no-brainer. Lone wolves don't exist. Real snipers almost always have a spotter or some other friendlies in the area. This actually applies to all military units. They never send just one man to do anything. Also, vantage points. Contrary to popular belief, the highest point on the map is not necessarily the best vantage point. While it offers the best visibility, it also means that they can see you too, and it's the first place they'll look when that shot is fired. Exposed muzzles. You'll never see a sniper's barrel sticking out of a window or over a ledge. They'll stand far enough back that their barrel isn't exposed. Again, this has to do with concealment versus advantage. And finally, the crack shot. There's no special trick or training when it comes to shooting, it's all fundamental basics and it takes a lot of practice, math, and some natural talent mixed in. Most guys in the community are not what you might expect. Extreme patience and intelligence are key aspects to the job, so the guys who are good at it are usually quiet thinking types with extreme levels of will and determination. Not to be confused as beta by any means, but not brute force types either. A lot of my old buddies are just physically fit nerds, really. I can't count the number of hours spent talking about World of Warcraft while waiting to infiltrate or during training hides. One thing film does get correct is how close the teammates are. It's definitely a family. The decision to ask my now wife to marry me was made in a hide site with my spotter. Training is fun, but dope collection is pretty darn boring. Hours and hours through days and weeks and months, during all kinds of weather and lighting, just firing rounds at different distances to see the way the ammo and weapon performs for future reference, and meticulously recording the information. The math involved is not as difficult as it's made out to be and is often just repetitious. You don't have to be a perfect shooter, just perfectly consistent when inputting data, acquiring and holding sight picture, squeezing triggers and following through. Consistency equals accuracy, but a consistent shooter with textbook form is even more deadly. My source comes from 13 years and counting. My stepdad is a former sniper who spent several years deployed. I asked him for his answer, and he said the biggest thing they don't show correctly is the physical stress. In movies, the guy just shows up, sets up, takes the shot and leaves. He said they don't show how they have to sit there completely still for hours on end. An example he gave was one time having to wait 7.5 hours in one position and then getting told to stand down. My stepdad did never miss a shot in the field. He did get seen once though and have to bail out with his spotter very quickly. I loosely worked with one a few times. The guy was squared away. That's all I know, man. That's all I know. The The guy was like cut clean and dry squared away. He loved his job, was professional and an infantryman, not a professional sniper. It was a duty, an assignment. Missions usually revolved in 3-day, 72-hour assignments. That's all I know, man. Squared away. I don't know about movies, but video games get quite a few things wrong. For example, whenever my team would hit a mark, it wasn't always necessarily the shooter's job to run out and teabag the corpse. A lot of times, the spotter would be the one to do it, since the shooter was oftentimes busy getting repositioned for the next mark. The amount of math and drawing that goes into it. I had a clipboard with a storage and had equations taped to the inside, colored pencils and paper for fire plan sketches, a top-down map of what you see, and terrain sketches, which is a literal drawing of what you see, Ziploc bags for waterproofing, tape, and 2 calculators. When did you get busted in the act? You know, aside from being caught doing the deed in the back of my car by a police officer, I don't really have one that's truly horrifying, but I know the rest of the internet does, so let's hear it. When I was 6, I had to go to the bathroom pretty bad, and my father used to tinkle in the backyard all the time, so I ran out into the back as quickly as possible, and for some reason, don't ask why, I completely removed my clothing and proceeded to go wee-wees on our oak tree. And out of nowhere, I also went number 2 on myself while standing up. My parents and 3 of their friends, who had been enjoying their drinks, saw the whole thing. The problem for me wasn't that I got busted, it's that I got busted by the wrong person. In freshman year in college, I was in the dorms and I had a pretty goofy relationship with my roommate at the time. I heard his key enter the door, so I decided to do something funny. So I stood up in the center of our room and shoved my hand into my pants and began to furiously mime tickling my pickle. I closed my eyes, headbanged, and waved my other hand wildly in the air. I heard the door swing open and I just went for it, shaking my head and both my arms in an exaggerated fashion. When I opened my eyes to see his expression, I realized I was staring into the eyes of my roommate's father, whom I hadn't met yet. He was helping my roommate carry some groceries in from the car. He set down the groceries as quickly as he could and then just left. There was another trip, but he just left those at the door and didn't come inside. He'd flushed red instantly. In short, my freshman college roommate's dad walked in on my imitation of whacking the mule wildly in the center of the room. It was the first time we'd met. At the Mall of America, walking around the upper balcony when the floor started shaking a bit, I muttered out loud, "Holy crap, was that an earthquake?" I turned around and there was a morbidly obese woman walking right past me. Oh my god, I hope she didn't hear me. It still might have been an earthquake and a coincidence. Still, I can't imagine that either of you are feeling great for the next few hours of your lives. I too have done this kind of crap and you have my utmost sympathy. Post-whoopee with an undressed boyfriend laying in my dorm bed, I heard a knock at the door. For whatever reason, I assume it's my roommate, who was pretty chill about stuff like that, so I wrap myself in a towel and stand behind my dresser, about to head into the bathroom, and say, "Come in." It was both of my RAs coming in to do room inspection. It wasn't my proudest moment. I can't imagine what they thought about me and why I thought it was okay to say, "Come in," right then. I was at the Metrodome for a Twins game. I developed a severe case of itchy butt, and it soon became clear that a booster wipe was imperative. Left the game and stood in the long line for the stalls. When it was finally my turn, the large handicapped stall with the double-wide door was the one available. When I got in, I had some difficulty with the broken locking mechanism, but soon I got it to seemingly latch. I then went to town on my itchy butt. Facing the toilet so it would seem like I was taking a leak, I wiped once and again and a third time until it came back white. I threw the final tissue in the toilet, pulled up my pants, zipped and flushed, finally turning around to leave the stall, only to see 20 or more very uncomfortable-looking men doing their best to avoid any eye contact with me. The stall door had silently swung open behind me, and my shame was laid bare for all the world to see. I wanted to make a beeline from the bathroom, but in light of what I'd just been doing, and the fact that everyone knew it, that just wasn't an option. So, head down, I darted to the sink, washed my hands, and got the heck out of there as quickly as possible. I've never been so simultaneously embarrassed and amused at the same time. Despite my mortification, it was just too funny for me not to share. I bring down the house every time I tell this story. Walking home after a closing shift at Wendy's, my bowels suddenly went into watery-feeling red alert mode. Still 3 blocks away from home, 4 blocks away from any public restrooms, I glanced around frantically and spotted a house across the street with tall boxwood bushes surrounding it. Streetlights didn't reach it. Target acquired. I sprinted over, yanked down my pants, and squatted behind the nearest bush. Then with a hearty, "Hi-yo, I blasted my employee meal all over the wall, ground, bush, pants and undies, and shoes. With a heartfelt, "Frick," I gingerly tried to scramble out of my soiled clothing, only to trip helplessly into the crap-soaked bush as my understandably unremoved and equally crap-covered shoes snagged in my pants legs. I laid in the now crushed bush, cursing quietly for a moment as I didn't want to disturb the residents. Then I managed to kick off my shoes and remove the pants and undies without getting much further soiled. The undies were ruined, but the pants, with a little work, could pass for okay in the dark until I got home. Crouching behind that bush, bitterly enjoying the cool breeze on my butt and junk, I scrubbed the soiled parts of the pants in the grass, used my t-shirt to clean myself. I always took off the employee shirt after work, thank God. I did all of this as best as I could, shoved the undies and t-shirt as far into the bush as I could hide them, then stood up to inspect myself, ready to make a quick dash for home. The sound of 3 startled screeches rang out into the neighborhood as I suddenly popped up facing the house, directly in front of what I guess was the bedroom window, where both the husband and wife, in bedclothes, were staring in disbelief not 6 inches from my nose. I convulsively jerked back, again falling into the fricking bush, sliding off it to the other side on my back, scratching the living heck out of myself. Boxwoods are tough, by the way. I flopped like a fish in agony for a few moments, or what seemed like an eternity, then finally managed to stagger back to my feet and bound groggily away. Shoes forgotten, one arm clawing at my back, trying to feel if I'd actually impaled myself on that bush or not. It wasn't my proudest moment. In short, forced to take a horrific number 2 under a bedroom window, thoroughly humiliated by a bush, observed for an unknown amount of time by the occupants of said house. When I first started working in New York City, I lived on Long Island and had a nearly 2-hour door-to-door commute via the Long Island Railroad. One night on a later train, I managed to grab a great seat only to have them pull the train out of service and ask that we switch to a new train. For those that don't know, this is bullcrap because now all the people that were late and forced to stand have the advantage of exiting first and getting to the new train for a seat. I got off and I knew that I had no shot at a seat as I was behind hundreds of people going up the escalator. I noticed that the down escalator was totally empty and decided to just go for it. Ran my butt off to get to the top, took my final leap and came up short. I hit the deck flat on my face. Humiliated, I got back up and ran to the train. I've got myself a seat too. In short, don't go up the down escalator unless you're willing to pay the price. This is a wonderful depiction of how most of us would do in any given action movie. So thank you once again, people of the internet, for reminding us that we're not Jason Bourne, we're Terry, the overweight office accountant, and if we try to climb down via that scaffolding, we will in fact shatter our pelvis. Sophomore year of college, I was on the rowing team. The weather wasn't yet warm enough to be on the water, so we were inside on the ergs, which is what we call the rowing machines. We had some hard workout, I can't quite remember what, but it was an interval workout with 3 minutes on and 2 minutes off for 25 minutes or something along those lines. The point is that it was intense. More intense than normal. The intenseness of the workout was making me have to break wind, but the constant use of my leg, butt, and abdominal muscles prevented me from letting them out. So after 25 minutes, we had a 5-minute break before the next 25-minute piece, and I go over to the water fountain to drink. I had my music blasting and I was exhausted, so I didn't really notice my surroundings at all. I just took a quick glance around before bending down to drink. While I was drinking, all of the gas that had built up came to a head and was about ready to burst. Still bent over and drinking, I let it rip. I swear it was the loudest, largest volume emission I've ever expelled in my entire life, and I still have yet to top it. The force of my butt cheeks vibrating was violent enough to the point that it made my butt sore afterwards. It was a full second. Seriously, say 1001. And that's how long it went. Of absolute maximum flatulent thrust. It felt like I'd expelled my entire lung capacity out of my rear end. Feeling rather pleased with myself, I stood up and turned to go back to the ergs. To my horror, standing directly behind me, seriously not more than a foot from my butt, was a girl waiting to drink. She didn't look up, she didn't move in any way, her facial expression was completely frozen with her mouth wide open, eyes staring at where my butt had been. I quickly shuffled away and looked behind me after walking about 50 feet, and she still hadn't moved. I spent the rest of the next week bursting into random fits of giggles. It became a bit of a team joke. To this day, I'll sometimes think about it and burst out laughing. I also giggle at the fact that she may have seen who I was before standing behind me, and every time she sees me on campus, all she can think about is that one scarring moment of her life. In short, ripped an enormous guff when I was drinking at the water fountain, not knowing anyone was behind me. The girl froze in a look of terror. Maybe she's still standing there paralyzed to this day. I went to college about 4 hours from home. I was coming home from spring break one year. The parents lived in a rural area, and about the last 45 minutes of the trip, there was no place to stop and take a bio break. I didn't have to go at the last opportunity, so I drove right on by. I was about 20 minutes from home, and I felt the turd drop into the chamber. This wasn't a "ruh-roh, Raggy" moment right away. I felt I could hold it together. It would only be about 20 more minutes. All was well, and as I approached home, I think the psychological fact of, "Ah, yes, I made it," set in, and the last mile of my trip was sheer panic. But alas, this is not a tale of me crapping my pants. This is a tale of not expecting anyone to be home. I made it to the front door, and as I was clinching the Bombay doors tightly, I started singing a little tune to take my mind off the torpedo that was armed and ready to launch. Gonna crap my pants, gonna crap my pants, gonna crap in my pants. Over and over again. Walked into the kitchen and saw one of my mum's best friends who was there for a visit, unbeknownst to me. Mum was at work. Horrified, I immediately changed my tune and played it off like I was just lazily singing random tunes. Shush, 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 do-dum-dum-do-do. So I poker-faced it and went right for the John. But I think she probably figured it out. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In second grade, I was asked to deliver something to the main office. I was so excited that I got chosen that I forgot the door to the classroom was right at the end of the hall I was about to go down. The whole class watched me skip all the way down the hall. The sound of laughter was echoing down the hall, and the crippling embarrassment still haunts me nearly 20 years later. Listening to music in my car, awesome song comes on. For a second, I think I'm a rock star and bob my head up and down with that "I'm so hardcore" face. I do that all the time, I can't help it. I'm at a light and I look over, and my ex is next to me with his new girlfriend. They both start laughing and waving, and while they were still watching, I accidentally spit my own gum down my shirt. I cannot look him in the face when I run into him. I live in a small town and I see him all the time. I was about 13 and watching a Marilyn Monroe movie. She was doing this hot striptease, so I thought, why not? And started whacking the old hog. Now, I thought I was alone in an upstairs bedroom, so I finished, and then noticed there was a guy in the window smiling at me. I forgot they were painting the house. Later, my sister said to me, "So, you really like Marilyn Monroe, huh?" Oh God! I think it's pretty crazy that this guy, A, stayed watching a minor do his stuff until the end of the deed, and that B, he immediately decided he should share the fact that he was staring at self-fulfilling members of the household. Not sure that anything he'd have to say would hold up in court. My lord, I'd managed to forget this for 19 years, and now here we are. I was about 6, and my family had just gotten a cat. He licked himself all over, all the time, because that's just what cats do. Not understanding the purpose, I figured there had to be something awesome about licking a cat. So I was just sitting there, looking at the cat, who was just licking the frick away as usual. My sister was across the room, but otherwise occupied. Curiosity getting the better of me, I lean over and lick my cat. For the record, he tasted like a cat. So as I sat contemplating the cattiness, I hear from across the room, "Did you just lick the cat?" Yes. Sister was disappointed. I used to sketch customers at work when they were taking forever to order and just staring at the menu. Often I'd accentuate undesirable features because I freaking hate most of our customers. I stopped doing this when a lady came up to the counter and leaned over it asking, "What are you drawing?" It got awkward. No one noticed before her though. I used to work at Starbucks. We had this massive pair of tongs used for pulling paninis out of the oven. One closing shift, I had the brilliant idea of mimicking Pac-Man. I then proceeded to clap said tongs in front of my face while chanting "Waka Waka Waka" and walking out onto what I thought was a completely empty sales floor. I was greeted by all the members of my new boyfriend's family. I froze, and they were staring blankly at me. Awesome first impression. Oh god, here it goes. Two-part story. Starts with a whole day trip with my dad and a couple of his friends. After eating a couple of burgers my dad made, I got a massive case of the runs. I went into the woods to hide in a couple of trees. No biggie, I thought, after evacuating an ungodly amount of number 2. Later that day on the ride home, it happened again. Holy butt juice. My insides were churning, I'm trying to concentrate, it's 15 minutes more home. We finally make it, and as I take that final leap out of the car, I accidentally brown myself in front of all of my dad's friends. They, being the outstanding gentlemen they were, decided to go and get a couple of beers while I sort my crap-covered self out. So here I am, taking a shower to clean myself after the horrible incident, and I start to sing in the shower. I'm singing the Rocky theme at full power, tarun tun tarun tun. Finish my shower and say, "Frick it, no one's home." So I walk out undressed while doing the Rocky theme and air punching like there's no tomorrow. Walk across the living room where I feel a presence. It's my dad and all his friends staring at me, what the frick faces all around. Not my proudest moment. In short, I crapped myself then got caught air punching to the Rocky theme undressed. When I was an imaginative 13-year-old, I was always coming up with inventive ways to prepare for kissing a girl. I tried kissing magazine pictures, which didn't taste nice, and the mirror, which tasted even worse. Also a balloon. Seriously, don't bother. But I still felt woefully unprepared. One day, I was at a department store and I saw a shapely half mannequin that was sequestered away from the general public. I thought I'd give it a shot. Had to be better than a balloon, right? Not so much. I guess mannequins aren't cleaned regularly because when I pecked it on the lips, the funky smell and oily film hit me like a brick. That brought me to my senses and I turned to leave. I had to find a water source to clean whatever filth I'd just touched my mouth to. That's when I heard the bzzzt bzzzt sound of servo motors and I looked up at the security camera zooming in on me. My grandmother used to run estate sales for people who didn't know what to price things at, or for people who were still grieving and couldn't be bothered. I always came to help her out at estate sales because it was fun to just hang around with random people's old stuff. So one time when I was about 17, I'd kind of had some green herb, and I was hanging out in some dead dude's house when I found a milk pump for new mothers. I'm a guy, by the way. And I thought, what the heck? And I started to pump my chest for man milk. Not 10 seconds later, shirt over the back of my neck and hooked up to this pump, my grandmother walks in, manages to maintain the very blank expression on her face, does a 180-degree turn, walks out and closes the door after her. Not unlike Grandpa Simpson in the Burlesque House episode. And not a word of it was ever spoken again. In college, I lived with 2 roommates in second year. One weekend, they both went away back to their hometowns, so I thought it was the perfect opportunity to have my then-girlfriend over for some fun bedroom times without volume restraint. Saturday morning, we got at it again right after getting up, and after I excused myself, walking completely undressed to go get us some water. I walked out of my room and to the end of the bedroom hallway, and when I opened the door, one of my roommates was just standing there, about to light a cigarette. Inside, which was strictly verboten amongst us. We both just froze. We were staring at each other, me completely undressed and him with a cigarette hanging from his mouth, a lit match burning in his hand right next to the cigarette. I wheeled around after what seemed like forever and walked back into the bedroom where I fell over laughing. As someone who's been caught in this position and worse by flatmates, it seems like one of those things just neither of you ever mention again. And for whatever he could complain about, at least you weren't the one breaking the rules like he was. More something said, I was walking down the hallway at my school. I proceeded to walk up the stairs with my arms full of books. For some reason, I thought my body could handle the simple task of stairs, considering I'd been on them my entire life. I was wrong, of course, and my left foot caught on the staircase. I collapsed to the ground, face planting into a stair. My books exploded and scattered everywhere. I just looked up and screamed, "Gone!" Then I saw an elderly professor staring down at me. He made a remark about noise in the hallway and smirked. The wrinkly old jerk didn't even help me. I was in the park a few weeks ago and I noticed a mini tornado/whirlwind nearby that was about 10 feet wide, whipping garbage and leaves around in a perfect circle. As it moved closer, I held my ground and soon I was in the exact eye of the storm with flying debris circling around me. Accordingly, I clenched my fists and raised them to around chest level, then looked to the sky with eyes squinting through the dust and wind and let out a mighty extended "Roar!" to fully emphasize my powerful wizarding weather summoning skills. It was exhilarating. At least 5 people probably saw me, but I was unconcerned as they were mere mortals. I walked away like a boss as if it was nothing more than a morning stretch. A few years ago, I was walking through Walmart with my dad. We were just going to get something real quick. I was wearing a low-cut shirt, which is relevant. My dad and I were talking about funny walks people do, and I started in on this long stride, fast-paced walk. Well, my chest popped out of my shirt. I got them back inside real quick and looked around. At first, I didn't see anyone notice and then looked ahead and there was this guy walking towards us. I'm absolutely sure he saw, although he sported a pretty good poker face. When I was a teenager and my parents were away for the weekend, I decided that it would of course be the opportunity for an extravaganza of beating my meat like the world's worst butcher. I got hold of some adult magazines, set myself up nicely in the living room with the normal accoutrement, and after having a first great whack of things, I was ready for another go. Cue my furious and almost violent tugging, legs akimbo. Some really uninhibited crap. And then, looking slightly to the right of the TV, I see movement in the door. After quickly putting myself away and muting the various moans coming from the TV, I sprang to my feet and cautiously made my way to the door, just in time to glimpse the fleeing backs of what appeared to be young children exiting our driveway. I believe they may have been selling chocolates or some other school fundraising effort. Since then, I've been sure to keep my activities within reasonable limits and out of public view. My office has really tinted windows, and one time I opened the blinds and saw a big, fat lady pressed up against the glass, picking food out of her teeth in the window's reflection. It was really gross, and she never saw me. I just closed the blinds again. Wedding attendees. Did you ever see one get cancelled mid-ceremony? In 6th grade, my entire class went to our teacher's wedding. My teacher was the bride and about 3/4 of the way down the aisle when the groom decided he just couldn't do it. He walked off to the side and at first my teacher and her father didn't notice and kept walking, smiling radiantly. There was about a minute of really solid confusion, last-minute cold feet, bathroom emergency, before everyone realized what was going on. My teacher was whisked out of the church and an announcement was made that there wasn't going to be a wedding. This happened the 2nd or 3rd week of June. She didn't come back for the last week of school. Ugly situation. Not called off, just relocated. The bride wanted everything to be lit by candlelight as it was much more romantic. Well, of course, something, a wall hanging or tapestry of some sort, caught fire, set off the fire alarm, and everyone had to evacuate the church. The ceremony was continued and finished in the parking lot with a couple of fire trucks in the background. I worked at a bar when I was at university. 2 guys came in dressed to the nines. I asked what they were doing that day and they told me the wedding they were going to was cancelled. The maid of honor had been sleeping with the groom. One of the other bridesmaids had known about it for some time but decided the best time to tell her was the morning of the wedding. A co-worker of the groom got super drunk, stood up and announced she had been boinking the groom for the past 6 months. This was right before the bride walked down the aisle. The bride's cousin had a sudden and unexpected fatal heart attack. Took the entire family a month to recover. Bride and groom had a small ceremony afterwards.
God, what a drama queen. Just had to take the spotlight away from their happy day, didn't they? Some people. And yes, the narrator is almost certainly going to hell for that one, among many other reasons. Not a wedding I was attending, but my friend had told me about it. The ceremony was never called off, but in fact the bride and groom had decided not to get married, but just didn't tell their guests that. So my friend was telling me how this couple were having problems before the wedding. He would say going to their house was just awkward and that they'd always complain about each other to him. On the day of the wedding, everything from the outside looked normal. Bride and groom seemed like they were genuinely happy, but they'd decided to not actually get married. Like they never went and got a marriage certificate, so it was basically a fake wedding. They had a ceremony where they exchanged I do's, but it wasn't actually real. Guests bought gifts and everything for the couple, and they just cashed in and went their separate ways afterwards. My friend said he found out months after the wedding that the whole thing was just a hoax, and how they weren't giving any of the gifts back. I know it wasn't really called off mid-ceremony so much as the bride and groom secretly deciding to call it off, but I thought the story was wild enough to share. My father's first wedding. This took place in Colombia in the mid-1960s. He and his best friend were marrying sisters. They also happened to be my father's first cousins, which is an important factor. Anywho, this wedding became an impromptu family reunion since it was basically the same family on both sides. One of my father's relatives was a young man in the Colombian military at the time, and he was trying to entertain the family's children the morning of the wedding, while everyone was getting dressed and preparing. His chosen entertainment appeared to be playing around with deactivated hand grenades, apparently trying to drive a nail through them to mount them onto a board of wood. I don't know, that's just the story consensus. Turns out it wasn't properly deactivated and was a perfectly functioning grenade, and it performed its purpose admirably, instantly killing the young man and a lot of the family's collected youngest generation instantly. The wedding wasn't cancelled though, they just had a small quiet ceremony a few days later. Jesus. When I was in the Navy, scams for BAH, or Basic Allowance for Housing, were pretty rampant. I'm sure they still are to a certain extent. Basically, the base pay you receive in the military isn't that much. If you're married or you have kids, however, you get BAH, which is a tax-free chunk of change the government gives you every month so you can house your dependents. How much you receive is based off the zip code where your dependents physically reside. So if I'm stationed in Norfolk, but my wife and kids are living in Boulder, Colorado, then we get the BAH for Boulder, Colorado, and I live on the ship or in the barracks. It's fairly common, and the sailors who do this are referred to as geographical bachelors. Okay, so with all the setup out of the way, I was shipmates with a guy who was a complete sleaze. He was also bilking the Navy out of BAH for many years. He was turned in multiple times, but he kept getting away with it because, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to prove that you're only married for the BAH. Nobody says that it has to be a healthy marriage. Nobody says it has to be a marriage based on love. He had been married to an older woman, like in her 80s, living in San Francisco for the past few years. San Francisco has some of the highest BAH rates, so he split it down the middle with her and they each took home a decent chunk of change. In exchange, she played along, let him list her home as his home, and for all legal matters, considered him her husband. Well, she died and he was bummed and a little angry that he was about to lose a big chunk of cash. So he went out and began seeking his next paper bride in a high BAH zip code. He settled on a working girl from New York City who was from some Eastern European country. To legitimize all of this, he had a wedding and invited numerous people from work to witness it. I went there because there was a promise of free food and he told us we didn't have to get him gifts. Easy day. About 5 minutes into the whole thing, she backs out. Apparently, she didn't fully understand what he was proposing. I think it was mainly a language barrier issue. She thought he just wanted someone to pretend to be his wife, like hang on his arm at a party and say she was Mrs. Crapbag. She didn't realize that he actually intended to legally marry her. Quite a bit of this was hashed out in front of all of us because they retreated to a private area where, as I understand it, he pleaded with her to go through with it and promised to remit her about $1,000 every month as long as she played ball. After an hour of begging and pleading, she left. We ate the food, had a good laugh, and went about our lives. The guy also found himself a proper paper wife and began bilking BAH again before getting booted from the Navy for something completely unrelated. I was told the bride never showed up because someone was having cold feet. The worst part was I was a young kid at the time and couldn't understand why someone would break off their engagement to a person they loved just because their feet were cold. It took me years to realize it was a saying. Why doesn't she just put some socks on and get on with it? My mum's friend was dating a man with a drinking problem. When he asked her to marry him, she said she would marry him if he never had another drink again. He agreed to give up the sauce for her. The night before the wedding, his friends threw him a bachelor party with alcohol and he drank. When he walked down the aisle, he was staggering a bit and she noticed. "Do you take this man to be your lawful wedded husband?" "No, I don't." They paused the wedding and went back with the priest for a counseling session. The priest came out and sent all the guests home.
You know what? Good on her for sticking to her word. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile.
Went to a cousin's wedding somewhere in Arkansas, maybe Little Rock. The wedding was put on pause when the priest started coughing uncontrollably, turned red, and fell into the altar. He lived, but there was a mild panic at the wedding when it was discovered that he had had viral meningitis, and literally the entire church full of people, let's call it 300 to be fair, had to go to the hospital and get tested and prophylactic treatments. Sounds like that wedding was the event of the century. The viral event. Actually, there's probably multiple stories like this during the pandemic alone. My cousin was getting married, and about 15 to 30 minutes before the wedding started, she was told that the man she was going to marry was arrested and had been on Washington's Most Wanted because of stuff he did either with a 14-year-old or was planning to do with a 14-year-old. He was like in his mid-20s, he ended up in prison for whatever it was, and right after she told everyone, the back porch broke right under her and her friends. It wasn't much of a drop, like 6 inches, but that's when she burst out in full-blown tears. It was a very awkward day, and honestly, if I wasn't there to witness it, I wouldn't believe it either. My wedding was close to being called off since my husband's grandfather was close to dying. Everyone told us to go through with the wedding anyway, so we did. My husband's grandfather ended up dying close to the moment we said, "I do," and my father-in-law got the call from the hospital shortly after we left the church. They told all of his family, but not us about it. So we had a lame wedding with everyone grieving but saying, "It's nothing," when we asked why no one was dancing. We got condolences the morning after and congratulations on his funeral. I could still cry when I think about all that stuff. It was 4 months ago. I should start off by saying I'm black, meaning a wedding will never start on time, and showing up on time, you're probably early. After 30 to 45 minutes of waiting, the old ladies from her church and my aunties started talking. Found out this was the second time they've tried to get married. The first time they tried to get married, he got into a bar fight the night before. We continued waiting for about 1.5 hours total, and finally they told everyone to go to the reception space because they're about to lose the church. I don't think anything of it. Whatever, there's food, let's go. During the reception, she does it all. The first dance, with my uncle, the dance with her dad, all the traditional wedding reception things. If it's not clear, this is all without her actual husband. Well, no one knows what to do at this point. They can't really give speeches because the groom isn't there, and it just seems awkward to celebrate something that, for the second time, didn't happen. Well, the bride decided to do a toast all on her own. She gets on the mic and tells everyone about how maybe she's just not meant to be married, how she's tried to get married to this guy, and it just isn't happening. Then she goes, "You know where this N-word is? Do y'all know where? Where this mother fricker is? He's in frickin' jail because of his dumb groomsman letting him drive home from the fricking bachelor party and he got a DUI. So yeah, he's in fricking jail and we've been trying to get him out. There was no third time and no Prince Charming for her." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not called off, just interrupted. I was watching my friend's wife getting married. All was going well. Just as they were doing their photos, after being declared husband and wife, I leant against the wall to try and get a good photo, and I leaned on the light switches for the entire hall. All the lights went out, everyone was looking around, and thankfully no one else knew it was me, so in the confusion I tried to switch them back on. And they didn't come back on. Now, their wedding photo album has some nicely lit photos, and some that are slightly more edgy and dark. I've been filming weddings part-time for 7 years, and I've only seen something like this 3 times. None of these were straight up called off though. One of the groomsmen accidentally dropped the wedding ring and it rolled down the elevator shaft. Ceremony was postponed for a little over an hour. Funny thing is, maintenance found the ring, and apparently the groomsmen made up some bogus story to feed the bride. She had no idea what really happened. There was another one where the bridesmaid passed out due to heat stroke, and a third where a guest accidentally stepped on the couple's little dog, broke its spine, and had to be sent to the vet. The dog was like family, so the couple was MIA for almost 4 hours dealing with it. Must have been a real small dog. And that person must have been running or something. Me and my guys were asking ourselves, how the hell do you accidentally step on a dog? The wedding I was at still went ahead. The bride and groom were standing at the altar with the wooden rail in front. One of the groomsmen starts swaying, and over he goes, face-planting, hitting the rail on the way down. He ended up with a broken nose, and an ambulance was called, and he was taken to hospital. The wedding still went on, and everyone made the best of it, and we were happy for the bride and groom. Cut to the reception following, a little boy was running around like a mad thing, as kids do, and ran through a glass door. The ambulance was called, the child was taken to the hospital. He was okay. The marriage didn't last, though. You'd think after such a roller coaster of a wedding that their marriage would pretty much survive anything. Warts in the downstairs area. I'm not even joking. I was one of the groomsmen for my friend's wedding, and his family was super religious. I mean like Jonestown levels of religious. So he hadn't been intimate with his bride yet. So we were all waiting by the altar for the music to start, and we were silently chatting. Now, one of the other groomsmen, he had dated her for about a year before they, the current groom and bride-to-be, got together. And he let loose the following statement to another groomsman. Yeah, she's really sweet and all, but she gave me something fierce. And both the one he told that to and I asked him to elaborate a bit. And I'm sure she ended up giving him warts down there. We had maybe a good 3 minutes before the music started, and we all started telling the groom as fast as we could because he had a right to know if she hadn't told him. He had this look to him like he didn't want to believe it, but he slowly walked down the center aisle to go ask his bride if all of this was true. Now, when he gets up, his parents follow him because they think he's getting cold feet. The rest I can only describe from my place at the front of the church. For the next 45 minutes, we heard talking, then shouting, then crying on repeat. Then the dad came out and told everyone that the ceremony was going to be postponed. It was a small ceremony, so we were all just scratching our heads and we left. We all then got a call 2 hours or so later that the wedding was off indefinitely. Apparently, the groom's parents didn't want him marrying someone who wasn't a virgin, let alone with a transmissible disease. We gave him some space for a few days, and after a while he filled us in on some of the details. Most of that wasn't important, but the part that really punched me in the feelings was when he told us about how the bride had to tell him and his parents in her damn wedding gown that she got the thing from something that took place against her will. The groom didn't call off the wedding, the parents did. I still think they're absolutely warty pricks to this day. To my knowledge, though, the former couple still talks to each other, so there's that. My good lord. Well, to further add to the narrator is going to hell pile of evidence, fundamentalist religious people just kinda suck. If the guy was gonna marry her anyway, literally warts and all, standing in the way is just crappy and evil. Get bent, family of the groom. We had just finished the ceremony and everyone was heading into the building to start dinner. I found my seat near the bride and started to chat with her friends. I saw the bride sit down at the table next to me and say, I think I'm going to have a seizure. And she did. Fortunately, myself and a few other people had medical training and she turned out perfectly fine. After the EMS left, she stayed and finished the night by dancing and having fun. She actually had a history of seizures and had neglected to tell anyone or take her medicine this week. My best friend's wedding got called off. I was the master of ceremonies. His brother was his best man, so I was in a very unique way able to experience this beautiful event. I arrived about 2 hours before the ceremony was to start to chat to the caterer and check the microphone and speakers. As I was chatting to the DJ and just generally checking things out, I noticed every once in a while a waiter would walk by the bar with a tray of wine, beer, and shooters. I didn't think anything of it though. As time got closer to the ceremony at the church, people had arrived and everyone was having snacks and drinks outside the reception venue. Both the church and reception were on a vineyard, so they were right next to each other. The bride was delayed for a long time, something I couldn't understand since she was getting ready in the guest house right there on the property. In any event, we finally got the go-ahead that the bride was on the way to the church. They conveyed her on a golf cart, so we started getting everyone seated and ready for the show. I was standing at the entrance of the church to close the door after the bride entered, so I got to see everything transpire in all its glory. The bride climbed off the cart, and as she was walking towards the stairs with her father, she tripped and face-planted right there on the steps of the church. As this is in an agricultural setting, you can imagine that there's a lot of dirt everywhere, and accordingly, her dress was filthy. At this stage, I simply thought she fell over by accident and I ran over to help her get up. She dusted herself off, said she was fine, and continued in her usual fashion to enter the church. It's then that my suspicions started peaking. I noticed she was wobbling from side to side as she walked, but thought maybe she got hurt in the fall? As she started walking down the aisle, however, she was stopping to greet people in the aisles, making jokes, pulling faces, giving people thumbs up. It immediately hit me. She was hammered. By the time she got to the groom, he just stood there with his jaw open. He could immediately tell what was happening. She was standing there next to him in the church right in front of everyone, swaying from side to side and slurring. It was painful and cringe-inducing to witness. The best part is, she insisted the wedding proceed and that everything was hunky-dory. The more the groom wanted to suspend proceedings for a bit, she insisted they proceed. Then she exploded at him in the church in front of everyone, shouting and accusing him of ruining her wedding day, and then she stormed out of the church crying, and wouldn't you know it, she bumped into a bench in the aisle and went flying to the ground again. Wedding dresses are not made for running, and they're especially not made for drunken running. People helped her up and escorted her outside. The groom also left, and everyone just kind of sat there in silence. Since it was rather hot that day, we told everyone to go to the reception hall and have a drink, while the situation was being dealt with. The bride had been drinking the entire day, and those shooters and drinks I saw being carried from the bar were for her and her friends in the guest house. I inquired at the bar how much the bill was prior to people arriving, and was shocked to see that between her and 2 of her friends, they'd drunk 3 bottles of wine, 6 beers, 6 ciders, and a crap load of shooters ranging from tequila to Jägermeister. In any event, the bridezilla is now crying and throwing tantrums at the guest house, loud enough for everyone to hear at the reception. Apparently, she continued to drink some of the leftovers from the previous round of drinks. The groom came out to apologize to everyone and to say that the wedding wouldn't be going ahead, but that everyone must please eat and drink and have some fun since everything had already been paid and catered for. I made the announcement and I joined the groom and his family, who had flown in specially for the wedding, for a drink and to come to grips with what just happened. Many people, especially from the bride's side, just went home. Meanwhile, bridezilla was crying and drinking away in the guest house with her bridesmaids. After about an hour or so, with many people having left, she stormed out of the guest house and screamed at the groom for ruining her wedding again, except this time she's even drunker. She storms off with her friends, and eventually we see them climb in a car and off they go. We finished our food and had some drinks and called it a night. I drive home with the groom and his folks, only to discover when we got to the complex where he and bridezilla were staying that she was sitting outside at the bar, right next to the complex, still in her wedding dress, with makeup smeared everywhere and drinking beers with her friends. The groom phoned her father, who then promptly came to pick her up and take her home. And that's the last I ever saw of bridezilla. They tried to make it work by going to counseling, and things just kind of fizzled out. Mainly because she was always drunk. They'd lived together for 2 years or so prior to the wedding, and while she did drink a lot, I never noticed it was that bad. Meanwhile, my friend informed me it had actually been a bit of a problem, but he didn't think it would get that bad. Well, it did. The wedding photographer and videographer was a friend of ours and was recording pretty much everything, so there's still a copy of this out somewhere. It reminds me I should probably email him and request a copy. In short, bride was absolutely crap-faced, fell at the church, fought with the groom at the altar, and then stormed off crying and screaming, and then continued drinking. Gentlemen, what made you nope out before the second date? We went to her place, and her pets and plants were all dead. I saw goldfish floating upside down in a fish tank, and she had a dead hamster in a cage on her dining room table. She said, "Yeah, that happens a lot." And all I'm imagining is hamster after hamster starving to death right in front of her. The word sociopath floated into my mind. I made some excuses to leave, and she went a bit nuts at that point, which concerned me quite a bit, but at least I'd already figured her head was seriously spun. She rolled her eyes when I said she looked nice, she'd clearly put in a lot of effort, criticized where I chose to eat, complained about the music we went to see, I spent the whole date anxious, assuming that she was hating every moment, because, she didn't have anything positive to say about anything. And then she said, "I had a good time, let's do this again." Nah, I'm good. I've got enough negativity and mixed signals coming from my own brain. I don't need it coming from the outside too. Oh god, she's a complainer, just like my mom. She always manages to find something to complain about even when the situation gets better. I try not to be like her on dates. It seems that when people are constantly complaining, they literally have nothing to contribute. I went on a date with a lady I met online. She talked about 3 things on this date and little else: her pets, her ex, and the last time she had gastroenteritis. There was no second date. Went to dinner, she was on her phone the entire time texting, even when we were talking. Figured she was just in it for the free dinner, cause really, what's the point of agreeing to a date if you're not going to try to get to know the person? That's when you put down cash for your half of the bill and walk out. Frick that. What that person has just suggested is a real power move. I'm not sure that I could ever work up the nerve to do it myself, but honestly, people who behave like that date probably deserve it. What complaints can they make? Having to pay for their own share? There's maybe some nuance to it. If your date seems nice but you're just not interested or feeling the connection, then maybe pay for the bill. If they're behaving like an absolute jerk, pay your part and bail. So, I'm not proud of this one, but I'll share. Years ago, when I was still single, I met someone online. We chatted for a bit and she seemed cool enough, and we decided to meet up for a burger at a place I knew downtown. Seemed like a kind of low-key thing. I got into the bar a few minutes early and ordered a beer, then finished it. Then, 45 minutes late, she rolls in. First, okay, cool, we have jobs and we deal with traffic or whatever, but no excuse, just a shrug and, "That's how it goes sometimes." She sat down and we began chit-chatting. She asked about my work. I assumed it was a regular nervous bit of small talk. 2, but no, it was trying to feel out how much money I made. And 3, when she asked my job title and I told her, she immediately suggested that we leave this casual pub place to hit up a wine bar down the block. Okay, I guess. It's a little more upscale than I had in mind, but okay. We walk there, get seated, and then come the menus. 4, she ordered herself dinner. Some kind of seafood thing that cost an insane amount of money. And a bottle of wine. Not a glass, mind you. A $250 fricking bottle of wine. I'd already ordered a drink from the bar for myself, and I got the impression that this was not wine to share. She kept talking about how much her job sucked and how little it paid, and how no one at her work was fun to hang out with. Like the only conversation she had was bashing work and co-workers, with a few mildly racist undertones. 6. The whole time she was texting friends to meet up that evening. I was invited, of course, to party with them all night, and I assume to bankroll their fun. I discreetly went up to the bar, paid for my drink, and just left. I straight up noped out of there without so much as a goodbye. From my messages when I checked in online later, I know that I stuck her with an almost $500 bill and that she was going to sue me for it. Heard from the wine bar owner later, it was close to work and sometimes a happy hour spot for me, that she had apparently tried to skip out on the bill, but they stopped her and she paid. By the way, my very next date was with the woman I eventually married. That one went much, much better. She had a 1-year-old and told me about a recent nasty divorce. No problem until she told me that the divorce was due to the baby not being his. I drove her home because she didn't have a car at the time and she asked we stop for an errand. To pick up matching t-shirts she had designed for her and her ex. She said, "Haha, I can't wait for you to meet my older brother. He just got out of jail for selling smack." I said, "Didn't you just tell me that your younger brother was addicted to smack?" "Oh yeah, I wondered how that happened." Frick this crap, I'm out. When we saw Fury in theaters, she read the subtitles out loud. I'm not sure if she thought I couldn't read them or if she needed to sound them out, but I knew at that moment no follow-up was necessary. I arrived at her place and she told me to hop in her car as she just needed to drop something off at a friend's house real quick. It wasn't a friend. It was someone she had an appointment to sell those hot oil infusers and their millions of scented inserts to. I sat in a stranger's home for 90 minutes while they smelled them all. She wanted to go to dinner afterwards, and I asked her to please drop me off at the car so I could go home. She didn't think this was cool of me as she had a business to run. I guess I didn't even make it a whole first date. I went for a meal with this girl I met through a dating app, and it was going really well. We started talking about movies, and then we decided to go to the cinema to watch Inception. She said there was a cinema nearby, but I didn't know the area at all, so I used the GPS on my phone, and she held it and directed me. Once we got there, we started walking inside, and I realized I didn't have my phone in my pocket. I said I must have left it in the car and started to walk back to get it. She was trying to get me to leave it and saying we'd miss the film, but the phone was only about a week old, so I was really paranoid about it. We checked the car for about 10 minutes, but we couldn't find it. I asked her to check her jacket and bag, but she said it wasn't there. A couple parked next to us, so I asked them to ring my number because I couldn't find it. It started to ring, and it was obviously coming from my date's handbag. She took it out and said she must have missed it. I thanked the couple and locked my car, and as I turned back around, she was walking the other way. I ran to catch up and asked what was going on, but she was very dismissive and was barely talking. That's when I realized it probably wasn't an accident and just left her to walk home alone. She forgot to take off her wedding ring at the second date. She asked if I had any love interests still in existence. When I said no, she said she didn't believe me. She told me she wanted to travel the world and see old friends, who all seemed to be guys, and thought that I, as a lawyer, should work and pay for her travels. She was insane. She also offered to do the deed in her car in the first 5 minutes of meeting. No second date for you. When she said, "I'm so glad my fiancé is still deployed," I noped out and left her with the bill for that dinner. You know, say what you will about these people, at least they're open about what they're doing. Maybe they're making sure at least these men they're meeting are aware? I don't know whether that's honorable, but it's sure preferable to leading 6 months of a delusioned but happy relationship and then getting absolutely mauled by an angry Navy SEAL coming off their tour. So thank you, honest cheaters. Teeth as black as the night. She didn't have any diseases or syndromes, but simply no time to brush her teeth. For the record, her photos didn't show her teeth. If I ask you a question or try to talk, please reciprocate. I hate that I feel like I'm supposed to use up an arsenal of questions that will only get a brief response in return. I met her at a hospital. I was an ER patient for a hand wound and she was a phlebotomist. I asked her out to a movie and then dinner. We had a really excellent talk about comics and movies. We were getting to know each other and flirting. It was clearly a date. At the end, when I told her I'd like to do it again, she said her fiancé probably wouldn't be cool with it a second time. Here's a text conversation we had the day after the second time we went out. First time we hit a couple of bars, so we were drinking, which probably made it more bearable. Decided to give her a second shot with a beach date, but it sucked. Pretty much, she was just very negative and argumentative about almost anything I said. So I said, "Hey, thanks for driving yesterday. Anyway, I don't just want to ghost anyone because that's pretty mean, but I don't think we really click. Good luck with your move." She was moving apartments that week. Shoot. I should have guessed this was coming after how off yesterday felt. I appreciate your honesty. I know I poked you too much with the fishing comments, but were there other things I did that were really off-putting? I'd like to know so I don't keep doing them. I responded 2 days later because I was actually really freaking busy. "Sorry dude, work has been crazy busy this week, so I haven't really been on my phone. Mainly, I think we have different values and worldviews, and our differing personalities didn't allow us to get past those or discuss. Kinda seemed like a lot of the things I brought up led to negative responses, which makes it harder for self-disclosure and leaves the conversation at small talk and prevents any kind of connection. Don't take this as an attack, because I think at the root of it all, we just have different clashing personalities and never really found any common ground. Maybe I'm just being sensitive, but I did feel like there wasn't much willingness to understand my interests or values and a lack of agreeableness from you. So it felt as if I was being almost disparaged for my values and worldview. I like fishing and hunting, and she was a high-horsed vegan type. Okay, thank you for the thoughtful feedback. You're right that we have different worldviews, but I was close-minded in my approach to getting to know you and making you feel welcome. I definitely came off judgmental and bitter on Sunday, and I appreciate you explaining how that made you close off. Thanks again for taking the time to explain and for giving me a shot in the first place. Wow, that was so mature. You don't see that often enough. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I met a girl from my university for dinner one time, and she started the date off by saying she only ate with her hands and didn't use utensils because she's a super taster and can taste the metals they're made of. This wouldn't have been a problem if we were eating finger foods, of course, but it was a problem as I watched her eat a salmon fillet and wild rice like fricking Gollum. And to head off some comments I'm getting, she's not Filipina or of Asian descent. According to her Facebook, she's German/Italian, and I know those people use forks. The girl I met claimed that she was seeing other guys just to use them for free drinks, their pool, or their car was nice. I noped out of there real quick. 6 years ago, I went out with a girl who called me a racist because I don't like sushi. She chewed gum through our initial date, which was at a decent Italian place, including a bottle of good white wine. And she proceeded to tell me how she had married early, had 2 kids, girls, realized she was a lesbian, left her husband and took most of his money, lived with girlfriend number 1, left girlfriend number 1 for number 2, ended that, and then realized that long-term she needed an eggplant. I noped the frick out of there so fast. She never asked a single question about me. So frustrating. First, suggested we go to the nicest steakhouse in town. Then, when I assumed we'd go Dutch or pay for our own stuff, she assumed I was paying because she's, quote, just old-fashioned. Then asked me what my debt-to-income ratio was, and finally, upon learning I'd paid off my student loans, demanded that I pay hers off if I wanted a second date. I drove us to the venue, but I just drove home by myself after paying the bill. Go fudge yourself, Erin, you cheap witch. You see, gentlemen, one of the wonderful things about feminism is that we don't have to submit to the traditional mindset about dates. And while some of us do offer to pay for our dates, we're not legally obliged. The world of more equal dating with empowered, independent women has many perks, despite what certain people say. Enjoy it. First and only date with a girl I barely knew through some friends. I drove to her house, she got in my car, and smelled like she'd just dropped a massive turd but forgot to wipe. Went to dinner, I barely ate. Made an excuse to end early, dropped her off, and drove home with the windows down in the middle of winter. Pregnant, but no worries, the father is locked up. I was 32, she was 35. She showed up to dinner high as a kite. Dropped the C word several times, loud enough for people around us to hear. She then got loaded during dinner, ordered an expensive plate and barely touched it. She also told me I'm stupid for still buying books and childish for listening to music. She also insisted I had to take her out 2 to 3 times a week minimum. It was also implied she'd be moving in with me in the near future. She was unemployed and living at home, which honestly didn't bother me. The whole jumping into the deep end thing did. 20 minutes into the date, I text my friend, "Holy crap, turns out she's awful." She didn't say anything. Like, there's being nervous and then there's that. We were taking a film class together in school and agreed to go see a movie together, paying 50-50. That counted for extra credit. It became clear a few days beforehand that this was turning into a full-on date, and I just rolled with it. We were both single and I thought we could have a fun night out together. I asked if we could get dinner after the movie to talk about it and get to know each other better. She seemed excited by the idea, and I was looking forward to the night. I picked her up and she was dead silent. She was dressed to the nines for a casual date and was clearly nervous. I did my best to break the ice and run the conversation, and the best I could get out of her was a nervous chuckle and, yep. After the movie, I asked if she still wanted dinner, and she said absolutely, and then proceeded to watch me eat dinner while she stared at me. When I dropped her off at home, she told me she had a really nice time and hoped we could hang out outside of class again. I told her for sure, and we said goodnight. She flat out never said another word to me in class again. A year or so later, I ran into her at a party and asked her what the whole deal was about. She confessed she was so gosh darn anxious that she had no clue what to do or say. Apparently that was the first date she'd ever been on with a guy. It's a shame too, because in class we got along really well. I was just so put off by the silence that I didn't know how to approach her for the rest of the semester. Apparently, she's a semi-professional golfer now. I haven't heard from her in years, but I hope she's doing well out there. She chewed her food with her mouth open. Always kills me. Went for a walk in the woods. She walked about 5 feet ahead of me the whole time. Would think she was nervous about walking alone in the woods with a guy she didn't know, but she's the one that suggested a walk. I don't know. It was weird. She didn't even bring her wallet to the restaurant. I would have offered and obviously ended up paying, but that level of presumptuousness was an immediate turn-off. She showed up in a dirty white dress. Her hair looked like it hadn't been brushed in months. During dinner, she told me that she still lived at home, never wanted to get a job, and that she stole her dad's car while he was asleep to meet me at the restaurant. Then when she found out I was divorced, she said, "You didn't work hard enough to save your marriage." That hurt. She had no idea what I'd been through. I put down the chopsticks, went and paid, and said nice meeting you, and left. She said, "So you're a mathematician. Is it true all mathematicians are virgins?" Statistically, no. Also, goodbye. We went out for coffee. She bought a bottle of vodka and kept topping up her cup. I politely asked her what the deal was, and she said she liked to party. When it was time to go, she fell over and started screaming that I had to help her up. I did. I told her to wait right there and left. She didn't even fricking share the vodka. Well, you should have at least called a taxi. I'm going to say that I don't completely agree with your actions. Nonetheless, funny story, smooth exit, thank you for sharing. She was part of a multi-level marketing scheme like Beachbody or something. The list goes on, but that was the big no-no for me. Went out with a nice girl with similar interests, but the entire time I kept looking at her teeth and cursing my sensitive nose because I could smell her rank breath when she talked and really couldn't focus on anything else. Tinder date. She, quote, forgot to mention that she had a boyfriend. I became suspicious when I saw the background of her phone. It was a picture of her kissing with a man. When I asked her about that picture, she told me it was her boyfriend. The reason she was doing this was because her boyfriend was boring. She couldn't answer when I asked her why she didn't break up with him in the first place. Told her what she was doing wasn't cool and that she needs to be honest to her boyfriend, and I ended the date shortly after. So I take this girl out to a bar and restaurant, meeting her for the first time after talking on an online dating site. After she orders her food, she drops the bomb. She tells me for the past 7 years she's been a word that we can't say on YouTube, so let's just say it's the kind of dungeon master that has nothing to do with tabletop role-playing games. So I'm an open-minded guy. I'm cool with this. She probably has some funny stories, right? Well, she starts telling me these stories, and for the first half hour or so, they are pretty entertaining. Eventually, though, I want to talk about other things. However, anytime I try to change the subject, she immediately brings it back to dudes she's gone number 2 on. It got weird. I could barely get a word in. She basically didn't take a breath for 3 hours. Again, I'm a really open-minded guy, but there's only so many consecutive stories of gags and double-sided butt toy use a person can take before even the most open-minded amongst us starts to feel uncomfortable. At one point, I excuse myself to go to the bathroom. As I stand up and turn around, she seizes this chance to smack my butt and says, "Your butt looks like a baby pumpkin. I could bounce a quarter off it and get back 2 dimes and a nickel." Keep in mind, this lady is a professional. It was crisp and painful. To put this in perspective, I was wearing thick black jeans. She hit me in the back pocket, so a double layer of denim, and when I checked myself for the damage in the bathroom, it was a clear, fat red handprint on my butt cheek. Like I could see the lines in her hand. I could have mooned a psychic and they would have been able to predict her future. So I'm about done with this. We finish the meal and I drive her home while she still blabs tales of donkey tail butt toys and things I've never heard of, going into places I wish I hadn't heard of. So I pull into her driveway, and the second the car goes into park, she immediately grabs my family jewels, like specifically targets them. And it wasn't hot, it was a hostage situation where she had all the power. Then she straight up licks the side of my face, chin to hairline, her tongue as big as a Shetland pony. I do not want. Then she looks me in the eyes and says menacingly, "I'm gonna strap you into my dungeon." The frick you are? I choose life! I think to myself. How do I get out of this? She literally has me by the stones here. So here's what I come up with. I tell her, hell yeah, let's do it. I have a special toy I keep in my trunk. Is that okay? She says, sure, bring any toys you want. So I tell her to meet me at her doorstep while I bust it out because I want it to be a surprise. As she steps out of the car, she gives me a look that she thinks is hot, but is actually terrifying. The second her feet touch the ground, I slam the car into reverse and fly out of her driveway as fast as my car can go. You know how most people pull out of a driveway, switch to drive, and then drive off ahead? I didn't do that. I didn't want 1 second of switching gears to give her the chance to catch me. I pulled out of the driveway and just kept going down the street in reverse for about 5 blocks. The passenger door was flapping around, still open, because I took off before she shut it. When I'm satisfied that she won't catch me, I close the door, put it in drive, and go home. Gotta get back on that horse, right? Wrong. I got home, Iced my sack and deleted my online profile. Not today, Satan.
How did you see an idiot completely blow all of their money? Well, the accountant at the small business I work at does a lot of funny things with money. Has a perfectly good, paid-off car, but it was slightly too old to drive for Uber to make extra money, so she got a lease on a brand new car through Uber. After a month, she found out she wasn't making enough extra money from Uber to even pay the lease, and her commute was too far to drive the Uber car to work and back because they limit the miles. After she weaseled out of her Uber lease, she decided she needed a brand new Harley that she had no idea how to drive. This was over a year ago. She's ridden it exactly once around her neighborhood. She'll be paying for this motorcycle for another 4 years at least. She took out a second mortgage on her home to fix up to get ready to sell, and she's so happy with the remodel that she's keeping the house. She's a single mother twice over, and is always telling us how some nice man from her church paid for her daughter's school trip or whatever. She is the dumbest person I've ever met, and I'm always a little freaked out that she's handling our money. Guy I know won 10 grand. They then spent that 10 grand trying to win again. One of my coworkers bought a new car because, wait for it, she couldn't afford to put tires on her current one. This one just hurts. It hurts my brain. People only see the payments, not the cost. My boyfriend's friend's wife just did that with her Prius. She traded in her Prius that was a few years old for a brand new one because the old one needed tires and it would be the same monthly, except longer, and now they owe more than it's worth. Blew my mind when my boyfriend told me that story because the friend didn't seem that stupid and neither did the wife. Friend got $150K in life insurance from her mum passing away. It was gone in a year. She paid a $20K bail for her boyfriend. At the end of that year, he was also gone. She works at Popeyes now. God damn. I'm no financial genius, but at least I feel like when you get a gift like that, you have to put it into your house or something to help yourself out long term. Buy yourself 1 or 2 nice things, sure, but that's too much money to be an idiot with. Divorce. Growing up, we were good friends with a family that made it big with buying and selling airplane parts pre-internet. The couple went through a nasty divorce that got strung out over a 6-year period. The wife was 100% convinced through her crapbag lawyers that her husband had funneled money into secret accounts. He hadn't, and she wasn't happy with his initial offer, which was the mansion, half the multi-millions, and $5 grand a month for child support alone. The court proceedings went on for years, and at the end of it all, they pretty much had nothing due to court fees and lawyer fees. His business failed because of how unstable air travel became after September 11th. If she had just split things and taken that mansion and the other payments, she would have gotten $4.2 million from the divorce, not having worked a day in her life. In short, divorce is one hell of a substance. I have an idiot friend who's getting something like 30% of his wages garnished. Why? Because he forgot to pay his student loan. He's crap at paying bills, and it's not because he doesn't make the money for it. He has a decent job. He just literally ignores paper mail and emails reminding him and then eventually demanding him to pay off things like credit card bills and his student loans. If he does bother to read them, it literally goes in one ear and out the other. Just slides right out of his mind. After a few months, he'll remember, log into his account, pay the payment in full with accrued interest, and then just shrug it off like it's normal. Somehow, he forgot to pay his student loans for something like a year, and it went to collections. I told him he could even set up automatic payments for that crap, and he agrees it's a good idea. And then he just never does it. I offered to set it up for him, and it's always, later. A friend at 37 who had never worked any job that paid above minimum wage inherited tons of money from his father. Despite having absolutely no experience in any of those positions or even how to run or manage a business, he decided to open up a restaurant which was a disaster from day one and closed down not long afterward. Then decided to get into photography, threw away tons of money on super fancy equipment he had absolutely no idea what it was or how to use, and never made a penny. Tried to start a DJ business. No bite. Disappeared off the face of the earth right afterwards. My brother-in-law brought a used BMW for 15 grand with a credit card at 26% APR. This is the winner.
Actually, I think you'll find the bank is the winner.
Yes, he's the definition of financial irresponsibility. He used to buy Gucci belts and Armani shirts. Now that he has 2 young children, that's stopped and he's driving a beat-up Trailblazer. He's 42 now, lives in a bedroom he rents from my in-laws with his 2 kids and wife, and is working 2 jobs to get by. It's sad, especially for my 2 nieces, but I feel little sympathy for him because for years I lectured him about being financially responsible, but he cared less about that than the image of having money that he put out. My friend, whom I love dearly, has been driving me pretty insane. Her parents are terrible with their money, and she's been complaining for ages about how inconsiderate and irresponsible they are. How they infuriate her because they buy things they don't actually need with the reasoning of, well, it'll make us or someone else happy, so what's the problem? She calls me a month or so ago because thanks to her parents and their irrational spending habits and irresponsibility, she may not be able to finish school. She doesn't know how she'll manage to eat or afford anything she needs, and she can't get a full-time job right now either. So, she and her boyfriend, who she's breaking up with soon, decide that instead of saving their very limited money and using it wisely, they'd impulsively buy 2 puppies. I don't know the breed, but they'll be huge dogs when they grow up. They brought them from a sketchy stranger on Facebook who they don't know and who charged them hundreds of dollars for the pups. Her reasoning for getting them when she knows she can't afford them? They'll make me happy, so it'll help with the stress of not having any money. I'm still enraged, honestly. The hypocrisy, irresponsibility, and impulsivity is maddening. My friend is basically a 37-year-old child with a good salary. One month his water bill was $700. He asked me if I thought it was because his sink faucet was dripping. I said it sounded more like a broken pipe. He never found out the issue, he just paid the bill and said, oh well. A guy I worked with was always complaining that he was poor, although later I found out that this was solely due to bad budgeting and impulse spending. He was really good at his job, so I suggested that he do some freelance IT security consulting on the side. He did a job for a high-end jeweler which paid him about $2,000 for 2 days' work. He was ecstatic that he finally had enough money to fix all the problems he'd been putting off for ages, like the oil leak on his car, a new pair of work shoes, and getting his boiler fixed. At the end of the job, he was leaving the retailers with cash in hand when he spotted a high-end watch in a display case, which was $2,000 down from $3,500 or so. Unable to pass up such a bargain, he handed the $2,000 right back over and walked out with the watch. 2 days later, he was complaining because his fridge was empty. My response was, at least you can use the watch to time how long it takes you to starve. Pay their current vehicle off with savings, then immediately trade in that car and get a car worth a lot more, only to be back in deeper debt with less in their savings. This person made a lot of other stupid choices, but that's a different story. Every once in a while, my stepdad will calculate how much money he could save by quitting drinking, then decides to quit and starts spending like he has that money. And spoiler alert, he doesn't actually quit. This is the closest the narrator feels he's come to any of these. Not the drinking part, but deciding that because you've saved on something, you're entitled to spend it on something else. Dumb as all hell. And then some unexpected emergency cost comes along and knocks you further down the hole. Grew up fairly wealthy, went to a private school with lots of other wealthy kids. Knew one girl who had 2 wealthy parents pass away when she was young and lived with an uncle. She was messed up as a kid, really wild, always the first to try everything, in her own way incredibly sweet, and always protected the less popular kids. Anyway, she hit 21, got a huge trust fund. Her uncle put up a fight for the money because he knew she was going to go nuts with it. It wasn't for the cash, he had much more than her. Ultimately, he lost and she got everything. It was the beginning of the end for her. She blew through the massive wealth in 2 years, doing untold amounts of white snow, binge drinking, trips to crazy places, constantly surrounded by people using her for party money. We're talking millions of dollars here. Not a cent invested anywhere. Anyways, 2 years later, she's back with her uncle, not a penny to her name. He loves her, so of course he takes her in. Everyone who was hanging out with her for the past 2 years is gone. Everyone laughs at her behind her back. A few hospital instances where she took too many substances left her a little slow. She tries school, but it doesn't work. Her uncle gave her a, quote, job, but it's a token thing. At least she's lucky enough that she had someone to look after her in the end. My sister-in-law had a kiosk at the mall that didn't make that much money. She doesn't have another job except Uber sometimes.
She has 2 kids and always takes them to eat out and buy stuff that costs beyond her means. She lives with my mother-in-law and pays next to nothing for rent, so there's really no excuse. She refuses to even slightly thrift on her kids' clothes and constantly buys them stuff like Lacoste and Ralph Lauren because image is apparently everything. Her oldest just started kindergarten this year. He plays soccer too, so she splurged on the high-end equipment, and he's not really even that into the sport. Anyway, his teacher said that in her 25 years of teaching, this was the first time she was ever instructed by a parent to make sure their kid changed his shoes before PE. I just got the news this morning that she lost the kiosk yesterday. Too many fines for showing up late to open and bringing her youngest to work with her, so they shut her down. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend started up a gaming store, like for tabletop games, Magic the Gathering, D&D, gaming figurines, among other things. He mistakenly thought that because he was so interested in the material, it would be easy for him to jump into. He has no business acumen and has never owned a business in the past. He never had a lot of money, he always rented and was always behind bills, had child support and kids to pay for, though he was really good at penny pinching and saving money. But that was only half the equation. He ended up borrowing a bunch of cash from his new wife. He set up his store location in a small town that's rather out of the way, a bad location. He claimed the store was only temporary and was supposed to be a storage site so he could ship items sold off the internet. Thus, he never got much traffic and therefore very few sales. However, it was a source of contention between him and his wife. He had confided in me that his store was ultimately a reason to get out of the house and away from the family, which is not really a good reason to throw money into a business. He and his wife ended up divorcing. He decided to quit the store. He ended up with a ton of merchandise, packing his meager apartment that he'd been trying to sell. Worst of all, he apparently didn't keep his books. He's apparently somewhere around $50,000 in tax debt to the state and increasing with fines. I find this astounding because there's no way he had enough money to justify that much in taxes in the period he owned and operated the store. I wonder if something else was afoot. I gave my brother a step-by-step plan to cover his rent, keep his job, fill up his car, and pay me back within a 1-week period. He was tight on money. I found him at Foot Locker with a large bag 2 hours later. That must have hurt. Yep, 2 pairs of Nikes forcibly shoved up someone's butt would hurt quite a bit. I used to work in a bank offering investment and lending advice, car loans, mortgages, retirement savings, that sort of thing. I had a client who was a successful lawyer, and his father was a very successful lawyer. He married a successful lawyer. They made a lot of money, easily over $1 million each, so $2 million per year gross household income. Every week they had 0 money left. I tried to help by setting up an automatic contribution to a savings account. If they don't see it, maybe they won't spend it. Nope, they spent it. Every week they'd call me to transfer the money out of their savings and into their checking account. So I sat down with them and went over their budget. They didn't have one. They had no concept of what things cost. They didn't have a firm grasp of how much they made or how much they spent. They bought impulsively and recklessly. The Dodge Viper was a big thing at the time, so he went out and bought one and financed it. He didn't have the space for it, so he rented space to store it. He never drove it. He had it customized with expensive aftermarket stuff. It was a work of art. I don't know if he ever drove it at all. He had no interest in showing it or anything. It was a money pit. She had never cut her own finger or toenails in her life. Her whole life she had just gone for a weekly mani-pedi. More frequently if she chipped a nail or something. She shopped, like a lot. She always looked amazing. They were very smart people but had grown up with money and had no concept of it. Like it would always just be there. I tried to help them budget, but that means deciding to go with something or delaying a purchase, and they'd never done it before, so why start now? I left the bank and they were still going week to week. Wonderful people, but just no concept of money. Me, when I was 18 years old and applied for credit. 10 years later, I finally finished paying off those damn cards. I knew a guy that bought a Trans Am, fully loaded and had a $700 payment in 1985. That's like $1,650 today. He ended up bankrupt. Another guy I knew told me he was going to declare bankruptcy for over $4,000 debt about 25 years ago. We were riding in his late model truck and I said, Why don't you sell the truck, settle the debt, and save up for a new one? He got furious and yelled at me for saying that. He ended up bankrupt and still lost the truck. I bet holding the "I told you so" gave our author an actual aneurysm, because it sure as crap just gave me a headache just reading about this from a random dude on the internet 25 years after the fact. My friend. When I met her, I thought she was so financially stable and responsible. She wanted to spend a day shopping for more conservative clothes to go visit family out of state. We tagged along and had a great time. She spent close to $1,000 on new clothes and taking us out to dinner that day. I've since learned that she has zero ability to budget, frequently can't make rent, and basically can't take care of herself. Opens a store credit card every time she's offered because the more lines of credit you have open, the better. She has about 50 credit cards open. Well, that's anxiety-inducing, and I don't even know the girl. I have a friend who's 40 years old, single, lives by himself, and will buy green herb as a priority over some of his bills. Every 2 to 3 months, I'll get a call asking for a bailout. He's also on Social Security and lives in a subsidized apartment and pays $120 for rent. It's very, very frustrating to get those calls for help. I went to community college my first year. I knew this guy that was from a super low-income family, and he received massive amounts of student loans. He blew it all on a used car, wheels, and a sound system. I tried to tell him it was a loan and not a grant. He disagreed. I lost touch with him a year or two later, but he has to be underwater in debt. College friend graduated with over $100K in private student loans. The bank offered a $5K credit towards the loans as a graduation gift, or $1.5 grand in cash. Guess which one they took and used as a down payment on a new car. For clarification, this was a new car to replace the perfectly good used car they already had, and they didn't get into a lucrative career. Last I heard, they were working food service. I have a colleague in her mid-50s who's divorced with no kids. She's the sole means of her own financial support. There's no parents or siblings to fall back on. She lives alone in an apartment. She recently took out her student debt consolidation loan. As soon as she gets those credit cards maxed out, she takes out a loan, pays the cards off, and runs them up again. I'd feel sorry for her if the charges were for general living expenses, but they're not. They're for highlights in her hair, manicures, trips to the Caribbean with boyfriend du jour, those cute sandals that she'll wear twice before replacing them with cuter sandals, high-end everything, makeup, perfume, and clothing. Once in a while, she'll lament about her $40K in loans and the fact that she's literally 2 paychecks from being homeless, and I'll gently point out that less trips to the salons and the islands might put her in a better financial position. I work hard and deserve nice things. I deserve vacations. I deserve to feel good and look good. Don't tell me how to spend my money. This coming from a woman who has to pay for her lunch with a credit card the day before payday because she's overdrawn on her checking account. I've seen her do this, and she explained why she was doing it. She refuses to believe that she's the cause of her own financial difficulties. I know someone that will refuse to work a regular job, lives off the women in his life, doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together at 52 years old, and complains constantly about how everything is rigged to keep him from succeeding. One of my old friends was living paycheck to paycheck, less than that some months. She was eating food from work for breakfast, which was one of those ice cream places. When I was asking her about her finances to see if she could cut back something, she mentioned that she smoked recreational green herb every day, several times a day, but she said, "It's only a hobby, I could stop it at any time." However, she refused to stop it when I told her it was a possible avenue to cut back on if she wanted to comfortably make her bills. It got kind of tiresome to constantly hear about how she had no money for food. My friend had saved up about $8K and was planning to use it to down a new car. Instead, his parents forced him to use that money to buy his little brother a used car. The younger brother is the spoiled golden child who's supposed to lift the family out of poverty. The older brother, my friend, is the kind-hearted but apparently dumb one who had to drop out of school to work and help the family. It was pretty easy for them to force his hand in helping to buy the car. Rather than buying something cheap and reliable like a Camry, the dumb little brother goes full JDM and buys a crappy, overpriced Nissan Silvia. The car still needed work, and the idiot didn't even know how to work on cars. When I found out what happened, I was freaking livid. I know how hard my friend had worked to save up that money. What's worse is that the younger brother crashed the car a few months later and it just sat in front of their house for almost a year before they sold it off for dimes. Not the worst, but I had a strong lesson about money management. I was 11 or something. Hitman Blood Money just came out. I was hyped. I loved that series, so I started to save money right away. I was saving by walking home instead of taking a bus. I was saving by not eating candy or drinking soda. I was really close. But one day as I was walking home, I saw my cousin. He was holding an RC car, brand new. I asked about it and he said he won it with luck. He told me there's a game in the market near us. I was amazed. So you can pay $1 and spin the wheel? I wanted to try that game, and I wanted to win. I said to myself, okay, John, just 2 to 3 games. I went there and spun the wheel. And then I spun it again and again. I lost, but I still had a lot of money, right? When I realized I'd blown most of my Hitman money, I was determined more than sad. I wasn't going to afford Hitman, but I still had a chance for that car, so I spun again. Reality set in when I was sitting on the curb with a bag full of crappy candy and plastic vampire teeth. I lost everything I made in 1 month over 1 hour. I learned a hard lesson early. So I'm really grateful, but I still keep my saved money somewhere I can't reach easily, just in case. When did a bro stop a party by trashing the place? Partying at an old fraternity house in college, and in the basement there was a lone PVC water pipe that stretched from floor to ceiling. This room also happened to be the location of the heaviest beer pong table known to man. Late in the night, after copious beers had been consumed, some wise guy decided that the beer pong table needed to be relocated. He proceeds to push the adamantium table up against the wall with some force, effectively shattering the PVC pipe. This is in the middle of winter, so ice-cold water starts spraying in a 6-foot radius out of the pipe, dousing nearly everyone in the room. Girls are crying about their hair and clothes, and the guys are yelling at each other about finding the shutoff valve, which took about 5 drunk minutes to locate. Meanwhile, I'm standing bone dry on the opposite side of the room, drinking a natural light. Don't judge me, it was college, and watching an impromptu wet t-shirt contest. It was a good night. I saw a guy snort a whole Xanax and then throw a pool stick through a flat-screen TV. I don't know if that counts. Oh, don't worry, it does. Well, the Xanax didn't work, I guess. A friend of mine threw a party at his house a few years back. The house was split up into apartments, the first floor being one apartment and the second floor being another. Both floors had a deck out back, one right above the other. I was out in the backyard smoking a cig and talking to someone. I look over to see a few people drinking immediately behind the first floor deck. I happen to look up at the second floor deck to see someone walk out. He proceeds to then whip out his equipment and wee-wee off the back of the deck onto the group of people below. I was at a house party where the token hated roommate immediately got smashed and was stumbling around. He goes into the bathroom for about 30 minutes and then comes out giggling like a madman. He loudly declared that he left an upper decker in his own bathroom. Boy, were his roomies mad, and he thought it was the funniest thing on earth. He didn't find it so funny the next morning when they all but forced him to clean it up the moment he was awake. My God, my money definitely wasn't on someone's party foul being against their own living place. Also, I absolutely hate that upper decker is a common enough thing to become a recognized term. If you don't know what it means, feel free to Google, but for goodness sake, don't use image search. I know a guy that wiped his butt with a nice white face towel in my friend's washroom because he was too lazy to look for TP in the drawers beneath the sink. Also been to several parties where people got mashed and just tore the fricking house up, stealing and breaking stuff for the hell of it. That, to me, is the ultimate party foul. If someone is kind and gracious enough to offer you a roof to get drunk under, snacks, seating, and company, you better damn well leave the place in a relatively good condition. I was at a party in an apartment complex. I stepped out to the backyard for a smoke when I had a powerful urge to go number 1. I was already hammered at this point and didn't give an F. I only had one shoe on, for instance, and I found a nice remote corner in which to relieve myself. Now I'm done. I suddenly hear the door to the backyard smash open and hear, "What the frick are you doing?" I zip up and turn around to find the super. Now, this super was already a legend for being a jerk, but that night he was getting ready to hit the town. And being the middle-aged Romanian he is, he had a 70s tuxedo-style shirt on with the buttons down to his chest. He had his hair slicked back and was sporting a huge gold chain, Miami Vice style. I freeze. Think. Just think. I stammer. No English. What did you say? No English. Me no English. I'm Asian, and I'm saying this in my most broken Chinese accent imitation, helped on by untold shots of Jameson. Where are you from? China, says I. No, you frick. What apartment? Now my English breaks down utterly, and I'm still just gesturing and pointing and saying stuff like, my friend, his place, up there. After 5 minutes of this, he glares at me and kicks my butt out of the apartment complex, which is fine except I'm wearing one shoe, don't have my keys, wallet, or phone. I see the super lock the front door and the backyard door. I have no way to contact my friends at this point, so I walk across to the neighborhood bar. The bartender kinda recognizes me. I explain my situation and he just shakes his head and gives me a pint of beer. He lets me use my phone to call my friends, but they're already too hammered to pick up. So I spend the night standing across the street from the apartment building, hiding in the shadows of a tree so that the super doesn't spot me, and waiting for anyone to enter the building so I can sneak in behind him. Later on, my friend tells me the super went around asking everyone if they knew who the whizzing Chinaman was. In short, booze turned me into a one-shoed illegal immigrant. A friend of mine was going wee-wee off the back deck of a cabin into the woods when a girl was stumbling back from said woods. I was standing about 100 feet away and I saw a glorious yellow arc strike this girl on the face and shoulders. She just walked right back to the bonfire like nothing had happened. She may have assumed it was rain because she was really hammered. I told her what happened shortly after so she could clean off that smell. In grad school, a few friends moved into a house together in their second year. The house was a death trap waiting to happen, but that's another story. They threw a party a few weeks after getting their keys, and for some unknown reason, a group of 10 to 12 freshmen had caught wind of the party and just showed up to get hammered. I arrived late to the party with some friends and immediately noticed two things. A, it is a complete sausage fest. All of the freshmen that arrived are male. And B, the faint but very distinct smell of number 2 invaded my nostrils as soon as I opened the door. Not dog do or cat scat, human turd. I guess that's the curse of having a very sensitive nose. I seek out one of the hosts, Will, and he gathers his roommates to make sure no one has clogged a toilet or upper-decked them. All of the bathrooms are clear, yet the smell remains and it's growing stronger. My friend Alice, one of the very few women, figures out that the smell is coming from one of the freshers in the living room that's drunk and dancing with a huge load of crap sloshing around in his undies. Not just a little, a huge saggy bulge that's clearly visible through the kid's khaki slacks. The smell in that room was overwhelming, but somehow none of the freshmen seemed to notice or care. We all just stared at him slack-jawed for a minute before Alice walks up to him and tells him that he may have had an accident. He flips out and bolts out the door, leaving little splotches of brown every time his foot hits the floor. It had run down his pants leg and was just beginning to drip off the cuff when we caught it. I left, they clean up, and kicked out all of the rest of the freshmen. The urinals in my fraternity specifically say flush up, because if you flush down, they flood. And if you flush down and then decide to kick the handle back up to rectify your mistake, there's a biblical torrent spraying in all directions. Many parties have been fouled by this arrangement. A friend of mine hooked up with a guy and then told him she loved him, at which point he avoided her at all costs. The next weekend, she showed up at a party in his dorm, crawled into his roommate's bed, and cried and vomited for 3 hours. Getting her home was a blast. Was at a party once with a friend who had to go number 2. However, the girl that had lived there was occupying the sole bathroom and refused to hurry up. My friend proceeded to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and left a fecal present in the vegetable crisper. You know, the narrator swears that he's been trying to spread out the stories involving bodily emissions like this. However, there seem to be a great deal of them. So please bear with me and understand that I'm cutting out the many gagging noises while I edit this. As some of you know, if you pop the top off a beer bottle with the bottom of yours, all of the beverage comes out. So, is not the correct assumption that you have to drink it all. This one girl goes up to my friend with the right idea and pops the top off of his beer bottle. But I guess she was a little too inebriated and just shatters the entire bottle in my friend's hands. My friend, who is now bleeding, looks up and says, "Oh, my hand's bleeding. Someone get me another beer." My friend did a heroic job of finding a trash can to chuck up in last New Year's. Unfortunately, it was a mesh trash can. A friend was getting angry with the guy who was throwing the party, so when everything calmed down and most people were gone or asleep, he got the butter. He microwaved the butter, then poured the melted butter into a bowl. Then he crapped in the butter carton. Then he poured in the melted butter and let it set in the fridge. Then he left. Maybe the butter didn't look right after, but I don't know because we left. And yes, he got the idea from urban legend. There was this guy on my swim team in college. Super nice guy, but terrible with women. He used to be really shy about changing in front of the rest of the guys in the locker room and would always change under a towel while the majority of the rest of us wouldn't bother. Then one day, the towel drops and we all see that he has a huge member. At first, we were all flabbergasted that this quiet, semi-awkward, prototypical nice guy was so well endowed. No one could keep it to themselves, and pretty soon all of the girls on the team knew about his big secret. At the next big swim team party, after a night of drunken teasing and congratulations, I think he felt emboldened, so in an attempt to distract the other team's opening shot at Beirut, or beer pong, he whips out his equipment and starts spinning it around helicopter style. His spinning member accidentally knocks over all 6 of his team's cups, and they instantly lost. I was having some friends over for dinner, and one of them began to eat his salad with his entree fork. The rest of the party was absolutely horrified. I nearly dropped my monocle. I was at a party in high school at my loaded friend's house. She had a hot tub which a few of us noticed was being seriously underutilized. My friend's widely despised redneck girlfriend got in first, and after I got a fresh beer, I stripped down to my boxers and made my way across the enormous back deck to the flush-set hot tub. As I stepped in, my foot slipped on the smooth fiberglass seat and to the side, right between the redneck girl's legs. I actually felt my big toe penetrate her as I fell into the water. I managed to keep my beer level and above water. As soon as I got my head back above water, she screamed, "My cooter!" I couldn't stop laughing for a very long time, and I still yell that sometimes when I see that friend. I think I redeemed my drunken clumsiness by A, saving my fresh beer, and B, by eliciting such a ridiculous reaction. In short, I slipped into a hot tub, fell in said tub, kicked my friend's girlfriend in the hoo-ha, who screamed, "My cooter!" managed to hold on to my full beer. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Watched a girl blow chunks mid-beer pong throw all over the table and then scream, "Chuck and rally!" We all cheered. She was one of the last ones up. At a bar in Liverpool in the UK, I was talking to my girlfriend at the foot of some stairs. Suddenly, a guy fell forward between the stairs right down between us, rolled onto his feet, and walked away without missing a fricking beat. The best part was he was wearing a fur coat, sunglasses, and a hat, carrying a drink, and had a cigarette in his mouth. As he walked away, his drink was unspilt, and his cigarette remained firmly in his mouth. His hat and glasses were similarly undisturbed. Must have been some kind of party ninja pimp. Beat a bunch of jerk dudes at beer pong with a hot girl as my partner. Proceeded to lift her up, with her straddling my waist, and gyrated, quite suggestively, in triumph over the table. I was quite drunk, so I dropped her, and the cups of beer on the tabletop went flying. My friend, when hammered, has a teensy bit of a throwing up problem. He was angry and paranoid one night and started using his geyserous discharges as a projectile to ward off people chasing him from behind. The same night, I was helping him relieve himself of his own chunks in the carpeted hallway of my dorm. A young gentleman shook his head as he passed by, saying, "That's just sick," and continued on to relieve his bladder in the trash can opposite of us. I like my school. I got this. This happened to me. This is a true story. I was having a small party at my apartment, about 20 or so people. Everyone's having a good time. beer pong, Halo, Peter Tosh. Throughout the night, I got pretty flirty with one of the ladies and took her into my room. Son, I was drilling it. The thing is, though, unlike many Americans, I haven't had the snippy operation on my eggplant, and my outer skin tore. Something called the frenulum of prepuce is actually what tore, to be more specific. There was blood everywhere. I ran into the living room, undressed as the day I was born, holding my bloody rooster and screaming for everyone to call 911 because I broke my Johnson. A few of my friends and the girl stayed with me until the ambulance arrived, good friends, and the rest left. The girl was so embarrassed and crying. I remember holding my ruptured eggplant, putting pressure on it, trying to comfort her and tell her it wasn't her fault. Crazy fricking night. I'm a frickin' legend these days. My roommate called my mum and told her I was in the ER, so she showed up concerned. Laughing, the nurse who cleaned the wound was gorgeous and just kept repeating, "I'm so sorry." She later added me on Facebook because apparently I'm a charming mother fricker on Norco. The doctor stitching me up felt it necessary to describe in detail how these kinds of injuries don't usually bleed as much as mine. This is my best and worst put together. My friend had an old Prince Albert scar that he shot bottle rockets out of when he got drunk. One party he was in my kitchen and shot a bottle rocket out of his junk and it flew right through the living room. It hit my other friend right in the forehead and exploded just as he opened the front door to enter the party. He got a cut on his forehead and was freaked out and angry until we explained, and then he almost died laughing. We sure were young and dumb. In short, my friend shot a bottle rocket out of his Johnson and accidentally hit my other friend in the face with it. To clarify, until Googling just now, the narrator thought that a bottle rocket was a small firework of some sort, and this story had a completely different tone when you think it's a guy blasting pyrotechnics out of his junk, and imagining the scarring that he was causing. This is still a wild story anyway, but it feels tamer now that I know a bottle rocket is powered by compressed air and not gunpowder. Someone stole my only bottle of 2009 Dogfish Head 120-minute IPA from my cooler. This is a highly limited, yearly release beer that costs $10 to $15 for one little bottle, and I was saving it for that night, my birthday. Apparently they didn't like it because the next morning I found it open, but full on the bathroom counter. I was at a party with a girl who I was very interested in, and she was very interested in me. Even though we weren't on a date, we were together, telepathically and ocularly screwing the entire night. The night started with tequila, salt, and lime, a Mexican's wet dream. However, given our underage stomachs, our light statures, and our intolerance to booze, we were prone to disaster. And that's exactly what happened. After about 5 or 6 tequila shots, Alberta and I were feeling rather randy. Excited and youthful, imminent flirting occurred and I wanted to impress this girl by bringing us more drinks. You know, to show her how manly I am because I can consume an excess amount of alcohol. We were drinking Rolling Rock bottles in the basement gathered around a table filled with empty bottles, and recklessly throwing these beers back trying to impress one another. After about 3 or 4, we were indubitably hammered. What happened next will never leave my mind for the rest of my life. Alberta turned ashen, and then like a chameleon, camouflaging itself in a tree, her skin transformed into a green color. She sprayed a fountain of projectile chuck all over myself, the table, and herself in a matter of about 2 seconds. I still remember the taste and smell of her lunch because it sprayed on my face, presumably corned beef on rye. To make matters worse, because she was hammered and embarrassed, she stumbled onto the table, causing an eruption of glass to shatter amidst the ground. Subsequently, she fell into the pile of broken glass, cutting herself worse than a knife-hungry, angsty emo listening to Hawthorne Heights. So now she was covered in blood and spew, and I was standing there sporting her lunch, without the slightest clue of what to do next. Everyone's eyes were on her. Little did I know, Alberta is one of those girls that's extremely sensitive to blood, and even mentioning the word makes her queasy. It didn't help that she had the freaking Seine River of red running down her leg either. Amidst all of this commotion, she fainted on the ground and started to tremble. That's when the worst part happened. She dispersed a freaking chocolate mudslide out of her butt, and it dripped down her legs and onto the ground like a fondue fountain. So, here's this girl covered in spew, bleeding like a fiend, and crapping herself all over the floor of my buddy's house. I helped her up, grabbed her some paper towels, and a water and made sure she was conscious and going to survive. And I dipped the scene faster than Colton Harris Moore evaded the FBI. 3 years have passed and I haven't seen or heard from her since. Sister came home from a hard night of partying and apparently had taken 4 consecutive shots of Wild Turkey 101 as she was leaving. Minutes later, my brother came bounding out of her bedroom saying, "You've got to see this, dude." We go into her bathroom to find her passed out in the fetal position, 1 foot from the loo, with her skirt, but not panties, pulled halfway down her knees, and a large, firm turd halfway protruding from her undies, resting gently on the inside of her thigh. We then called her boyfriend to come clean up Mrs. Turd Lady. He comes over, cleans her up and puts her to bed, at which point she begins to chuck up all over herself and her white sheets, creating a pink, chunky river leading to the edge of her bed, resulting in a smelly, putrid waterfall. I put a bucket under the waterfall and go to sleep. At a party when I was about 19 with my girlfriend. She got a call from her friend who was on a date and needed to be picked up. I was sober, so my girlfriend and I went to go get her. The friend was hammered and got in the back seat. She started crying about how the guy dumped her after she gave him a down-under kiss and even swallowed. She kept burping and saying, "Oh God, I could still taste him." We drove to the girlfriend's place and her friend rinsed her mouth out with scope and chewed a half-pack of gum. Then the 3 of us went back to the original party. After a couple of hours, the guy who dumped her shows up at the party. The friend starts drinking even more. After about an hour of this, she goes up to him to try and talk things out. She opens her mouth to speak and she hurls all over him. She was taller than him, so she got his face and chest. My girlfriend yells across the room, "Holy crap, she just snowballed him!" The room got quiet. The guy loses it. He smacked the friend so hard she flew backwards and bounced off the wall. And then he started to kick the wall, and he threw a lamp into the TV and hurled the stereo through the window. All the while, the girls are saying, "Somebody stop him!" But unfortunately, we'd all been told privately that the friend had gone south of the border on him, and we all knew that along with the chunks on him, he had his own baby batter all over his shirt, so we weren't going to touch him. After a couple of minutes, he just left. He got arrested a few hours later at his house, did some restitution and community service, and had the name Chucky Snowball until he went to college. In short, girl goes south of the border on a guy and swallows, and then he dumps her. They met at a party later, she chucks his own splooge back up on him, and he goes berserk, earning a new nickname and criminal record. My friend and I rented a hotel suite to have a New Year's Eve party. We were all set to have an awesome night with about 15 people coming over. One of our friends, we'll call him John Doe to protect the guilty, called the front desk at 8 p.m. and asked them to give a message to us indicating he wouldn't be able to make it to the party. So the hotel manager calls and says the following in broken English. "Are you ready to party? John Doe can't make it to party. No party allowed in room." We had to cancel and sat in the room in disbelief at how our friend just ruined our party by trying to be thoughtful. Have you ever heard of a flaming Dr. Pepper? You pour a shot with amaretto and Everclear, light it on fire, drop it in a Coors Light, and down the whole thing at once. It does taste like Dr. Pepper and is a great way to get smashed. Anyway, I saw a guy spill the shot after he lit it on the tile floor of the kitchen. The frickin' tile floor was on fire, that and he spilled booze. Double party foul. What pranks did you play on your school using the IT computers? Used an altered version of a JavaScript web browser hack that turns all of the pictures shown into pictures of French toast. Rotated monitors 90 degrees in graphics card settings. I did this a lot in primary school until my teachers sat me down for hacking the system and I was almost suspended. My school district used Macs pretty much everywhere. A couple of the most common pranks. There was a key combination that would invert all of the colors on the screen. If I recall correctly, it was the meta keys and 8. It was a lot of fun to do this to someone who left their computer unattended and didn't know that. Then one of the function keys, I think F11, would move all of the windows to the outer edge of the screen, showing the desktop. Pushing it again moved them back, but there was an animation associated with both of the movements. If you held Shift while tapping F11, it would do the same thing but with the animation slowed down. The thing is, it didn't matter if the animation had completed or not, the machine would queue up another action for each time you hit F11, but wouldn't cancel the animation in progress. So, if you were quick enough and someone wasn't paying attention, talking to their neighbor, looking at a book, etc., you could lean over, spam Shift plus F11 a few times, and effectively force them to watch all of their windows slide in and out at a snail's pace for a minute or two. Took the Windows startup sound, edited in 8 minutes of dead air, then edited in 15 seconds of bedroom noises. Made that the new startup sound. Ah, yes. Back in grade 6, this kid decided to write XXX a bunch of times in a Word document, then turn up his volume up to max and have the computer read it out. Cue 24 11-year-olds laughing as his computer yells out a naughty word over and over. Putting an S after the HTTP part in the web address bar. It bypassed the school firewall. I felt like an awesome hacker. My God. You mean that was all that was holding me back from complete browser freedom when my friends and I were just spending all our lunch breaks in the computer lab instead of out in the sun? I feel so cheated. It probably doesn't work anymore, though. I remember at my old school someone managed to disable the H key on lots of the computers. If you were typing and tried to press H, you'd get an error message saying like, "Sorry, but the H key on this computer is currently disabled. Please try again later. The H key is disabled. Type help to fix it." Control, Alt, and directional arrow flipped the screens different directions. I stopped when I was told that I could permanently mess up the computers. And then I started again in college. I did this to a friend and she didn't know how to undo it, so she turned her laptop sideways to Google how to fix it. I did that in grade school. They had to pay a computer technician to come in. He said that there was a virus and it wasn't fixable, and left. I flipped it back the next day. When my school got smaller, more modern monsters, I'd flip the screen upside down, but also turn the monster upside down so it looked normal. Oh, I mean monitors. Autocorrect is a birch sometimes. Unplug mouse from the back of computers 1 and 2. Switch the plugs, but leave the mice where they are. Mouse in front of computer 1 is now plugged into computer 2 and vice versa. Watch the hilarity ensue. Ah, IT teachers, those jerks that provide me with job security. We'd take a screenshot of the desktop as it was, then delete all of the items off the desktop, then make the screenshot we took the wallpaper. We'd watch people futilely click on the wallpaper and enjoy. Something else we'd try on occasion, since we were in graphic design class and had access to the necessary programs, besides Paint, was create fake window warning and dialog boxes. We'd make them say things like, delete computer? Or delete hard drive? Or something else completely obnoxious like that. Then we'd just remove the no option or make both options say yes. When it was done, we'd add it to the wallpaper that's already on the computer so it looks like there's a real dialog box that's popped onto the screen. This only worked once or twice that I remember. I think we fooled the programming teacher who was really just the baseball coach teaching a class in order to remain as the coach. It's harder to get someone with this one, but it's equally funny. Our school had a standard wrong password 3 times lockout rule. Given the IT teacher was a stone's throw from retirement, he wasn't the quickest. I think we managed 3 lockouts in one session. Our school network ran on Windows for Workgroups 3.0. Machines were locked down so you couldn't run your own programs on them. However, we discovered if you put a modified win-ini file that allowed you to install your own programs in a network drive that came before where the lockdown version was stored, it would use that and you could install stuff. And that was my first introduction to Doom multiplayer. Somebody threw a Molotov cocktail into the window of a computer lab at my school. It was over a weekend, thankfully, so nobody was there, but it destroyed all of the computers in the room. My friend and I got blamed for it because the teacher whose lab it was thought that we didn't like her. Which, that's true. Thankfully, our alibi was that we were on a plane flying back from a school exchange trip to Belgium when the damage occurred. There were several teachers on the flight to corroborate our story. That and, plane tickets. I used to play the hidden Excel 97 flight simulator during my boring high school typing class. Joke's on me because I still can't type properly. I rendered all of the school's computers unusably slow for a day by putting hundreds of millions of copies of a picture of a fat frog onto the shared hard drive, filling it completely. If you had the patience to sit there until your computer logged on, you still couldn't save or do anything. Back when the mice had those little tracking balls on the bottom, we'd remove the balls and leave the rest of the mouse. As a side note, does this count as neutering computer mice? Nothing malicious, really, just bypassing the security BS and playing a lot of StarCraft. Soundboards. Holy crap, were we little demons in middle school with those things. My personal favorites were either Arnold Schwarzenegger or Pulp Fiction. When the teacher would ask if there were any questions, from the back of the class you would hear in a thunderous voice, "Who is your daddy and what does he do?" followed by an eruption of laughter. Also, following up any time the teacher said, "That's correct," with "Correctamundo." If you're reading this, Miss Jadish, I'm so sorry. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Some kid found a way to print from all the computers in school from one computer. So naturally, someone printed 800 copies of a picture of a turd to all the computers in the school. 'Twas known as Brown Thursday. Our IT was crap at our school. If you knew the specific computer number, you could make it shut down only using the Windows command exe. The staff stopped seeing the fun in it when we found the principal's computer number. My middle school, which had Windows XP, had a startup folder from a network share. Except they forgot to remove write permissions for students on the drive. It was a teacher share. We added a startup script to open and close the drive. A couple of days later, every computer in the library was marked as out of order. It's wild to think that I would have gladly done any and all of these and laughed when I was in school, but little crapbags like me were causing absolute nightmares for school's poor IT workers who were just trying to go by one day without kids finding their ways to print butts directly onto the staff room printers. I just put a bunch of strange messages in autoexec.bat. Every time the thing would boot up, you'd get a quote like, "Do not look behind you," or "The package has been delivered. It's in locker number," and then I'd give a random unused locker number. Or something like that would pop up. Also the command, on startup, run paint. On open paint, renders the computer unusable for a 2007 high school IT professional. This probably shows my age, but we'd open BASIC and write a little program that went something like this. 10 lprint you suck, 20 go to 10. Then we'd edit the shortcut to a popular program like Microsoft Word to link to this program instead. When an unsuspecting user clicked to open what they thought was a legit program, instead they'd be treated to the dot matrix printer screeching out, "You suck! You suck! You suck!" forever. The only way to stop it was to find and terminate the program. Powering down the printer and turning it back on again wouldn't do it. My high school had a program on all of the computers that would allow the teachers to watch an entire classroom's screens, take control of them, and send content to them, among other things. A friend of mine came up with an idea to try and use it to prank the classroom, being the genius 16-year-olds that we were. So when my teacher wasn't looking, I put a USB stick into her computer and copied her spy program exe directory onto it to take a look at what was different between the teacher and student versions. Turns out all you needed to make the student version a teacher version was a 25-character license key that was in a plain text file. So obviously, I copied it and upgraded my client to a controller using all of my teacher's settings. We then proceeded to rickroll the classroom on full volume from 34 computers, which was pretty great. At the end of the class, we came up with another great idea. What would happen if we took control of our teacher's computer and messed with her? So we connected to her computer, but she had been watching our screen from her screen. So for about 5 seconds, we see a bottomless pit of our screen in her screen mirrors over and over and over. After about 5 seconds, our PC fans got super loud and then shut off. When we tried to turn it back on, it was a black screen with only a flashing underscore in the top left corner. That PC had to be re-imaged by district tech support. Still not sure what caused that. Me and a friend replaced our computer science teacher's My Computer icon with a shutdown shortcut displaying a "Mwahahaha" message for 3 seconds before turning off the computer. She clicked it 3 times. Wasn't really the sharpest arrow in the quiver. Some guy has been updating a games folder on the school's public H drive. None of the teachers or tech support guys can get rid of it or set it up so that we can't use it. No one knows where it came from except it's been there since forever. It has Counter-Strike 1.6, Day of Defeat, Halo Combat Evolved, a Halo ODST emulator that actually works, I too have questions, Roller Coaster Tycoon, Team Fortress Classic, Doom, KOTOR, Minecraft, Old School RuneScape, Elder Scrolls Morrowind, and a few others. Like a lot of people suggested, I went and looked at the games folder to try and copy it. Much to my dismay and others, the folder is now almost gutted, excluding a proxy program, Halo Combat Evolved, Undertale, and Counter-Strike. I guess they got wise to us. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In 1998, this idiot bought like 5 scanned adult magazines on a floppy disk and decided to open them in computer class, suspended on the spot. I have no idea what the frick he expected to happen. Guess he was thinking with his hard drive, not his floppy disk, if you know what I'm saying. Well, we moved all of the abacus beads to one side. Yes, I'm older than most Redditors. When I went to school, electricity wasn't invented yet. We used candles to watch TV. I'd always switch the buttons on the keyboards to spell naughty words. I'd discovered a way to disable the teacher's view of my computer. After logging in, I simply unplugged the internet cable that connected me to the school server. The spy program would appear in the toolbar. I'd simply exit the program and reconnect the internet cord. My screen would just appear totally black on their screen. The teacher was kind of impressed I was able to find a way to disable it. She only warned me to not do it again. In 5th grade, I found out you could set words to autocorrect to whatever you want in MS Word. Then Word got out and suddenly half of the words you typed on any computer would autocorrect to "I love D in my butt lololololololol." The teachers were horrified. 4 words. Nicolas Cage Chrome extension. I'd always take the little rollerball out of the bottoms of the mice, guaranteed an afternoon of entertainment every time. We figured out we could make the computer sound like chainsaws by putting a handful of quarters into the CD drive. Then we did it a lot. Shift and print screen to capture desktop, open Paint, Ctrl-V, rotate image upside down and save, set image as desktop background, auto-hide taskbar. On desktop, right-click, view, uncheck, show desktop icons, laugh at random victims attempting to use the computer. This is a combination of 2 of the more common pranks found here, the monitor rotation and the desktop picture replacement. Totally the kind that me and my idiot friends would do and then immediately get caught because we were peeking and laughing over our big box monitors. In 2001, I think, friends and I installed StarCraft deep in my school's file network, accessible on every computer in the building, and we had it programmed to run without a disk. You'd still need a CD key to play, but hacked and false CD keys were really easy back in the day. We passed out false CD keys to those who knew to ask us. And since it was all on the shared network, you could LAN from basically anywhere in the building. This was right around the time when computers were becoming really prevalent in schools. Not just with computer labs, but many classes now had multiple computers, or were specifically just on computers. So we'd end up organizing these pretty large StarCraft battles across the school. Even got to the point where, in drafting class, where the teacher absolutely didn't care what we were doing, it even got to the point where my 2 friends and I, massive nerds if that wasn't obvious, would play some of the jocks in the class who loved StarCraft. We didn't just break into the system to have fun, we also broke down barriers to make life better. We also doctored a local newspaper article to look like it was a story about how our principal, who was out on medical leave for back surgery after he fell off a roof, was actually on leave because a gerbil got stuck in his butt, and his wife lit a match to look down the insertion tube to try and see if she could see the gerbil, and the tunnel of methane ignited in a small explosion, giving his butt cavity 3rd-degree burns. The gerbil survived, singed and exhausted, but otherwise okay. We then printed it off and passed it around the school. In hindsight, that was a pretty messed up thing to do. I changed the screensaver from liberal arts by putting an F in front of arts. Oh boy, we pretty much ran the network. It was up or down at our whim. The entire network used hubs, and this was right as routers were becoming a thing, so they weren't yet economical. We'd shut down the entire network with a repeated ping command in DOS set to max packet size. It was far too simple. We wouldn't usually do it for long, just enough for everyone to think it was a hiccup and to see if we could. Our computer class was actually really awesome. The assigned modules were easy, and once we were finished, our teacher would let us do our own thing. Turns out, our school had an entire computer graveyard. We'd go in there, find parts, and build entire computers. Eventually, we had a separate network of 8 or 10 machines that we used exclusively for Quake 2 and the original Halo. One day, the school came in and removed our separate gaming computers. We were angry. The network was down for quite some time. So, computer class for most of grade school was nothing more than endless typing classes. She sells seashells by the seashore and other tongue twisters to get us practicing home rows and typing quickly. Absolutely mind-numbingly dull. Sure, getting to play Commander Keen or Wolfenstein after was nice, but the reward was nowhere near worth the effort to reach it, and the teacher would constantly get frustrated with me ditching home rows and finishing faster and more accurately without them. So one day, with us both being frustrated with each other, I restarted the computer and opened the BIOS setup utility and started changing random settings to random values. Yes, I was a vindictive child. Yeah, I was a typing pro due to my online gaming habits back in middle school, like StarCraft, Diablo 2, Warcraft 3, the others. I got my teacher into a deal that if I could accurately finish the entire course curriculum in 4 classes, then I could play Oregon Trail for the rest of the year. A lot of settlers died from dysentery that semester. To the dumb student who tried to mess with the school computers by shoving paper into the CD tray, don't use paper with your class schedule, full name, and ID number on it. Idiot. I did that on purpose. And that teacher didn't have my name or ID number on it. You fell for a classic one. I never did anything to damage computers, just circumvent security measures. Using standalone browsers or games from a flash drive, using said browsers or proxies to get around web filters, installing programs and games in the C-root directory, since most group policy or other security measures wouldn't stop something from executing from there. Finally, I can contribute. I was in college, in a classroom, waiting my turn to an exam, which was held in another room. Bored out of my mind, behind me was a PC. I saw a red button that said 220. I say out loud, "What does this button do?" and press the button. The button now says 150 and a loud bang and smoke comes from inside the PC unit. I'd turned the PC power supply from 220 volts to 150, which toasted it. The room was full with my colleagues. Everyone looks at me in disbelief. I begin to laugh out loud, not believing what just happened. Luckily, nobody told on me to the professor, who was a pretty grouchy guy. I managed to install Linux on almost 90% of all computers at the school at once. There were several flaws in the network that I discovered over the years that let me essentially ruin, to the IT department at least, over 110 of their machines. Firstly, since these were mostly Macs, I was able to abuse their poorly configured guest account system to gain screen sharing access to any Mac that was currently logged in, regardless of the account that was currently in use. Second, the IT department set up some sort of program that would read a script file, then update the Macs according to the file via single user mode, I think. I modified one of the update scripts to a Linux image instead of an OS X update. I can't remember what I did, but I think there were specifically modified images that will install a default system state silently, requiring no user input other than the parameters for the disk partition when being run in the command line. That somehow worked. So essentially, the next scheduled update completely messed the school by installing an OS that nobody knew how to use. It was glorious, and apparently it was cheaper to toss the Macs and buy new ones than pay the IT department to actually reinstall OS X by hand. Whatever, I got a ton of free Macs that day. Unexpectedly good outcome. I think it was in 2004, my IT teacher let me use an old laptop for a project. Inside it was a floppy disk with the username and password for all users on the learning platform we used, including teachers. The rest of the semester I logged into the teachers' accounts, found the hand-ins from the best students, downloaded and made it my own, and handed it in from my own account. Never got busted, but I realized I used almost the same time altering assignments as I could have if I just made my own. Also had some fun with the Let Me Rule Trojan from time to time. You people are what prevents me from being able to finish my coffee in the morning. Damn you all. Not school, but many years ago when I was a hapless little bag of crap, I was walking by a couple of computers in one of those "we sell anything" cheap stores. There was one on an end cap, it was running 95 or 3.1, I can't remember. So I logged out, opened DOS and said, Format C, and walked away. I'm sure I've paid for it over the years in karma. My friend and I entered into the operating system itself a virus that would essentially hunt through email accounts with .edu addresses, so all teachers and admin, and display a picture of two women doing the deed. If the operator clicked more than 10 times, a video started. If the operator clicked more than 20 times, the noise started. The only way to get rid of it was pretty simple: Control-Alt-Delete and use taskbar to shut it down. Not that complex, obviously. Although, to be honest, I didn't do a lot of programming. I did some of the basics, however. I mostly did the strategic planning of how we were actually going to get it done and implement it. My friend's dad was a programmer and a hobbyist hacker, so he actually helped my friend design it. I still find it hilarious that his dad was willing to screw with the teachers. He must have really hated our school a lot. However, most teachers didn't know that. They didn't know who did it, but it was hilarious.
Which cool job is actually lame and boring? Oh my gosh, build a bear. The weirdest and most frustrating thing. Granted, I didn't make it a super long time in the job, and seeing kids happy is great, but they're really strict and the bad times get pretty bad. That store is just parents with sticker shock trying to talk their kids into cheaper options. You go in to do the little $35 bear and walk out $150 later with a bear in a full tuxedo with a skateboard and a construction helmet, so people are just kinda angry at you when you work there. I'm a forensic scientist, and it's literally the only thing people ask me about on dating apps. It's very technical work and it's extremely routine. Oh my god, same. I'm an archaeologist, and I imagine we have very similar conversations. Usually, when I meet people, I avoid the topic at this point because the pressure is on me to drive the energy of the conversations with the exciting 3% of what I do while avoiding too many technical terms. It's kind of deflating to see how quickly people go from 100% to zero interest because of my explanation. Preschool teacher, especially with the new COVID-19 regulations. Have you ever tried social distancing 3-year-olds? Barnes & Noble. Your job has literally nothing to do with books, and it obviously attracts a lot of that type, myself included. Park ranger. Don't get me wrong, I loved it, but a lot of days it was less talk about cool animals while wearing your ranger hat, and more, the toilets are overflowing again, go clean the septic tank filter and stir the tank with a shovel. With a little bit of, hey, there's a crazy guy on Crystal down by the bridge, can you convince him to leave without murdering anyone? All for the low price of $26,000 per year with a college degree. I hate the idea that this comment might dissuade anyone else from becoming a park ranger. These jobs are so varied, and I just happened to work for an underfunded agency with too few staff. Honestly, I still loved the job and would have kept doing it forever if a higher-paying outdoor environmental job hadn't pretty much fallen into my lap. Being a park ranger taught me so much, and most importantly, I got trained as a wildland firefighter, which is still my favorite part of the job. If you've always dreamed of being a park ranger, please go for it. Yeah, I was thinking that if you got far away enough from any major cities, you could at least avoid the people who are just traveling out there to do substances. And then if you're really in the wilderness, they'll just get eaten by bears. Winning. Professional photographer. Not like hobbyist, but business-owning photographer. Sucks the love right out of your work. Because you started the business to take pictures, but then Karen doesn't like the way she looks in one of them, so she wants the whole set for free, plus a reshoot for free, plus those images for free. Then the two high school kids getting into a very ill-advised marriage at exactly 18 years old wants to book you for their wedding, but their budget is only $50. Then that Karen calls back because she now loves your work and wants to pay for another shoot, but only if you agree to do her friend's daughter's destination wedding for free. Then you get a call from your last bride. It's been 2 weeks since their wedding. Where the frick are her pictures? Then you get no leads from a bridal expo. Then a client finds out you don't support their political candidate and tries to take you to court to get their money back. Then some Insta thought who thinks she's influencing people offers a collab where you take professional photos of her and she adds a crappy Insta filter to it and claims her friend took them. And she's not going to pay. And then you get some entitled mum who wants you to photograph every day of her newborn's first year of life for $100. I just went back to being a hobbyist in the end. I do closed captioning. While I joke that yes, I get paid to watch TV, it's actually very tedious. And if you don't actually enjoy the programming, you're being forced to watch something you don't care for. Or worse, it's something I do enjoy, like a long-form drama. We usually chop those up into 15-minute increments and split between everyone, so I only see chunks and not always even in order. It actually ruins the show for me. We tend to get a lot of complaints from hearing-abled people who don't understand captions were mainly intended for the hard of hearing and deaf, so hopefully you get to read my captions and the viewing experience is still just as enjoyable for you. Working in a flower shop. It's just like any other retail job, but people constantly tell you how fun your job must be. Also, helping grieving families choose funeral flowers isn't fun. I'm a marine biologist. I spent the last week measuring defrosted fish heads. Well, I'm a scientist. I don't know if people usually think of that career as fun, but I think people think it's a lot more eureka and less, this data has to be manually processed for 600 hours before I can analyze it. Yep, as a bioscientist, it's never really eureka and much more, are my cells dead? Are my fruit flies okay? Are they going to fix the microscope? Will the microscope ever be free to book? Is 6 coffees too many? And a large part of my day is just spent doing tasks I need to keep my work running, like making buffers, sorting fly stocks, splitting cells, and cleaning things. And yet, I miss my lab whenever I'm not there. Not a specific job, but traveling for work. I'm in tech, and a lot of people starting out talk about wanting to go to customer sites and get out in the field. I love to travel for fun, but it's hard to fit in the fun stuff when you have presentations and stuff to worry about, and a lot of times your customers aren't in the fun cities anyway. I also think I prefer the stability in day-to-day schedule of traveling less frequently. Had a colleague who complained and whined that he was so jealous until he hit the road and quit after less than a year doing that. Yeah, I get to go to some amazing places, but more often than not, I was in a crappy hotel in a crappy location. Even in great places, your colleagues or customers go home to their families, and as much as I love exploring alone, it does get lonely. Yes, my tiara hurts my head, wah wah. I finally stopped when I got assigned a new and fairly attractive destination, and all I could think of was, ugh, how long is that flight, and can someone else do it? I sure miss my exec platinum airline status, though. TV and film production. I think most people dream of being the actor, the director, and the people making the creative decisions, or the big shot producer calling the shots, but most of the people working in TV and film production are part of a machine, the grind, working in a system, trying to climb up to wherever they want to be. Many don't get to actualize their creative vision. Also, the industry can be project-based, which means job security concerns, and location-limited to New York, LA, and maybe a couple of other cities. The pay can be low starting out too, though it can be good if you work your way up. But I did enjoy the type of people that work these jobs, a little more fun than the business folk I work with now. I have a lot of respect for the TV and film industry. I'd go back to it, but I'd be careful about what the job and career path was. Okay, so not necessarily bad, but beekeeping. You gotta get used to the constant sound of buzzing during hive inspections and swarm removals, plus wearing that protective suit in hot weather for hours on end, give or take the situation. Also, there appears to be a large number of beekeepers allergic to bees, so EpiPens are a must. Photography. I burnt out after a few years. You realize how weddings are so cookie-cutter no matter how original the couple thinks they're being or the religious segment they're attached to. The crappiest one has got to be the couple who refused to honor the contract and didn't pay me after their wedding. Naturally, I held their photos until payment was made. They tried suing me for not delivering their photos because apparently the 50% deposit was enough. Frick that. Took it to court and the Justice of the Peace, this is in Canada, ordered him to pay. Wasted a day and $400 to file the case. It really annoyed me for a long time since I met this couple at a church I used to go to. We even all hung out with the other church friends prior to it. Years later, this jerk and his wife were found to be running an illegal puppy mill. He tried discarding one of the puppies at a plaza shopping mall by throwing it into a garbage can. The puppy was inside the garbage can and crying, and people heard it and rescued it. Security cameras caught and ID'd the guy clear as day. Police raided his house and found he had a bunch of animals in unkempt conditions, and the whole house smelled like crap. When you Google his name now, you find all of this. Pure karma. That well-deserved karmic blow towards these garbage people aside, this is our second story about photography.
I've met equal number who've done it as their trade for many years and seem to love it, and hate it, and stories like this one just seem to repeatedly run into the worst crappy cheapskates in the world. My heart goes out to you hard-working camera jockeys. A pediatric nurse. Being a nurse for children and adolescents. Everyone in nursing school talks about how much they want to work with kids. The reality is that a pediatric nurse sees more cases of the worst sort of brutal parents and neglect than any other specialty. Doesn't matter where you are in the pediatric hospital, it's the thing you see most. I've seen so many DCS, which is the Department of Child Services, caseworkers, that I've gotten to know some of them and become acquaintances with them. Sure, working with kids and adolescents is great, but people don't think about the most essential piece of that puzzle, which is their families. It doesn't matter how good of care you give to those kids, if you don't loop the parents into that care, you may as well just not be doing anything for them. I always say the more fun it is to go somewhere, the worse it is to work there. Like amusement parks and arcades. Honestly, every job that lots and lots of people really want to do sucks, mostly due to supply and demand. You're going to be treated like crap, and if you complain, you're going to be fired, because you're inherently replaceable because there's thousands of people that would love to do your job for even less money than you're making. I tried to explain this to my father when I was going to accept a bartending job at minimum wage. He said I should at least demand $15 an hour, and I told him they'd laugh me out at the bar and find some college student willing to work for less than minimum wage. The fact I'd be getting minimum wage was because I knew the bartenders and owner, so I would have started out at a higher position than just entry level. I didn't want to bartend, it was just a guaranteed job with people I knew right after I graduated. It was more than I had otherwise, and I was easily replaceable for cheaper. Baker. Coming into work at 3 or 4 a.m. so you idiots can have 6 a.m. baked goods is miserable.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Demolition. Everyone wants to break stuff with a sledgehammer. Everyone's tired of lifting that same sledgehammer after 5 swings. Nobody wants to load the broken stuff into bags or a wheelbarrow and take it to a dumpster. I did a 2-week demo job years ago where I had to use a 75-pound jackhammer to destroy a concrete slab and grind rebar into pieces. I'm in good shape, and that job messed me up. Video game testing. I've been working in the game industry for 6 years now and teaching for 2. Testing video games is thought of to be, oh, you just play games all day? But it's actually very specific and arduous. First of all, there's a bunch of testing methodologies such as load and soak testing, white room testing, version testing to name just a few, but the most common one is functionality testing. Functionality testing is, so if I walk into a corner with the rifle in my inventory, I can clip through the wall, but if I have the sawn-off in my inventory, I don't clip through. Paleontologists. You don't get to work with full dinosaur skeletons and do all kinds of awesome expeditions. You're mostly sitting at a desk looking at some pictures and logging stuff on your computer, maybe examining a fossil occasionally. If you're lucky, you can go on a real dig and, oh my god, spend hours in the hot sun dusting off rocks. Working in an animal shelter. For sure, it's probably less intense than zookeeping, but the amount of people who apply or volunteer expecting to come in and play with cute puppies all day is absurd. We're basically animal maids. You deal with animals of all sorts of behavioral and developmental stages, crapping and weeing everywhere, and you look over and this one fricking dog named Chumbawamba is sitting in his water bowl, so you've got to fill that up 6 times and dry his kennel out, and then you go and mop up the cat room. Around 10 kittens just want to eat your mop, and also 4 kids are just yelling that something has spewed up on the floor and I must clean it, now. Not to mention all the extra behind-the-scenes work that the public never sees. How in the summer, during kitten and puppy season, the shelter built to house 500 animals has 750, and I didn't take lunch or sit at all for any of my shifts for the past 6 days. How the courts force us to put down animals that we know can be rehabilitated, but we don't get enough funding to fight it. How animal control just showed up with the 4th pregnant stray of the week, but intake is full and even double-stacked in some cases, so your co-worker fosters the cats in their own house. Not even to mention the crappy fricking people who do dumb crap and end up getting scratched or bitten, and the animal is the one who bears the consequences for that. I'm the proudest shelter worker in the world. I adore my job even at its hardest. I didn't sit for 9.5 hours today, and I found a cat turd in the cuff of my jeans. But it doesn't matter because a bonded pair of adult cats got adopted today. I took 6 applications this morning, and the cat in Bank 4 with the goopy eye is already looking better, and we sent a mama out to foster. The hard work is always worth it for these babies. Listen, I know it was just an aside in your story, but I really want to hear more about Chumbawamba. Alright. Chumbawamba was this silky-coated black and brown hound mix. He was super gangly and tall and had these big old ears and was a very good boy. But every fricking day, without fail, he'd flip his water bowl even with a non-tip bowl. So he gave him a heavier, deeper bowl. Every day, at least 4 times a day, Chumbawamba got this enormous, heavy-bottomed water bowl filled. It held close to a gallon of water. It weighed about 10 pounds empty and was too heavy for me to even really lift when full. Oh, thought Chumbawamba, I cannot flip this big bowl. It's too heavy. But Chumbawamba was an innovator. Instead of just flipping the bowl, he said, what if I got rid of the water? Then I'd be strong enough to flip it. So there goes Chumbawamba diving front paws first into the bowl and essentially digging the water out until it was empty enough that he could flip it. He was a big thirsty dork and I loved him even though he super annoyed me when he dumped his bowls. Accountant. Everyone thinks it's all fun and number crunching, but the constant stream of women throwing their undies and wanting to bear your children is honestly exhausting. You can't fool us, commenter. We all know you're just trying to keep us away from your cool, rad job and the lifestyle that's basically just one tier below Kardashian on the sweet grift factor. We're getting our CPAs and coming for your cushy, party-filled gig. Being an extra in a movie. Now, it can be super fun. I especially love historical and post-apocalyptic or sci-fi fantasy type stuff, but a typical day on set wasn't what I thought it'd be when I started doing it. Often we have to get up at 3 or 4 in the morning to get to holding, and if you're a minute late to check in, sometimes they'll just kick you out. Then we sit around in holding with sometimes hundreds of other extras, and we're usually sitting there for a good 3 or 4 hours before they start telling us to get ready to film. During this time, we go through a long wardrobe period, hair and makeup lines where they reuse clothes unless you bring them yourself, brushes and makeup without washing them. When we finally get to film, it's often the same mundane motions over and over, exceptions of course, and those are always fun. Then we either get shuffled around or go back to holding. Several more hours pass, we go film again. Hungry? You get lunch 6 hours after your call time and a usually meager supply of snacks. In between takes, it's more standing around, often in heat or rain, or you'll get shuffled into cramped spaces to wait. Days on set are often more than 12 hours, and I know someone who had to be on set for 26 hours straight. They can legally hold you there until they declare filming is done, so don't make plans for the next day. Not to mention that you rarely see yourself in the final cut. I'm not trying to bash other background actors or the film industry because I've met lots of cool people and gotten to do some pretty awesome things. For example, interacting with main characters in scenes, running around in the woods with fake weapons, or being a zombie. But when I did my first job as a teen, I definitely thought it would be a lot different. And I'm not part of the SAG union. Extras who are part of that do indeed get treated better with more perks. Also, it may be different in Hollywood. I've only worked in Georgia. I've also been a stand-in, and I like that a lot better because you're treated as the crew rather than, well, as an extra. Flight attendant. You're on call, on reserve, forever, and have a terrible schedule, have no life, and make no money for the first 5 to 10 years. And while you work for peanuts, you can't afford to use your flight benefits in any substantial way. Then, when you finally get a chance to use your benefits for a trip, you have to fly standby, which means you aren't guaranteed to get on the flight that you want. And then, if you do make it out of town, you'd better have like a week off so you can make damn sure you're back in your base city in time for your next work shift. Did I mention that there's an act of US legislation, the Railway Labor Act, that allows airlines to exploit so you don't get paid for certain work hours that you actually need to be working? For example, flight attendants don't get paid for boarding or any time the plane is at the gate. Worst job ever. Google Street View driver. You're all alone for more than 8 hours a day, can almost never take a break, need to be constantly on and focused lest you crash the 25 grand Subaru with the 60 grand worth of camera equipment in it. You end up becoming an amateur meteorologist to keep track of weather patterns and cloud cover, and in my experience, there are a lot of people who just get insanely angry at you, at Google, and the job in general for a wide variety of reasons. I enjoyed myself when I did it, but it was nowhere near as glamorous or fun as I or my friends or family assumed. The pay? $15 an hour, but contingent on hours driven, which were themselves dependent on clear weather to ensure optimal image clarity. Why not drive every day no matter the weather? Well, Google got around this problem by making you redrive routes whose pictures turned out subpar. To prevent people double billing by driving the same easy route constantly, you also had a weekly quota of unique miles driven, so no double dipping. What could you do in the car? As long as the camera and mapping software was running properly, I was on my own. I listened to music, the news, and lots of books on tape. I could stop for short bathroom breaks whenever I felt like it, and I had an hour guaranteed for lunch whenever I wanted to take it, which usually amounted to eating in the car on the side of some lonely rural road 90% of the time. Who would ever think this was fun or glamorous? All I can say is back in 2012, most people I talked to were pretty excited, myself included, about getting the chance to do any work with Google, let alone this cool new project that would let you see what any place on Earth looked like at street level from the comfort of your home. This was the era of Google Plus being a potentially exciting new thing, and of Google Glass being the future of tech, and overall it was a different time. That's why everyone I knew thought it was a cool gig. Being a character performer at Disney. Don't get me wrong, there are some amazing perks and truly magical moments. I know I'm super lucky and tons of people would love to be in my shoes. But the day-to-day work is exhausting in ways I never thought possible. Guests can be truly awful. I've had things said and done to me I never would have imagined. The company isn't always great, it highly depends on your leadership. And there's so much focus on your body and face, good and bad focus, that it can be incredibly depressing and difficult emotionally. Plus, you have to accept that there's very little upward mobility. Most people grow out of it, and it's rough to know that one day you'll get too old or too fat, and you'll have to start all over in a new career field. So you're either constantly thinking about what you're going to do when you leave, or how you're going to keep yourself there. I personally knew it would be temporary, and now I only work there seasonally while I have a normal career. But Disney has a way of sucking you in. Being a writer. I always thought it was my absolute dream job. But the only job I could get after college was working in a content mill as a blog writer. I used to work 70-hour weeks staring at the computer in the basement of an old bank writing bullcrap articles about the dangers of mold, fence cleaning, and why you need a commercial awning, and the dream turned into a nightmare. While I still write occasionally, I'm now working as a communications person, so it's a bit less heavy. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.